Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where the darkest truths of humanity are whispered in the night. This is Volume 10 of our true crime series, a collection of chilling stories meant to haunt and captivate, with only the rain to keep you company. These are not tales of fiction, they are real, raw, and unforgettable. Each one peels back the veil of ordinary life to reveal the shadows beneath, where greed, obsession, and desperation collide with devastating consequences. Tonight we bring you 10 cases that shook nations and left echoes that linger still. From a Christmas nightmare in Singapore to a blood-soaked feud in Jakarta, from a taxi driver's deadly secret in China to a digital romance turned fatal in South Korea, these stories span borders and years, yet they share one truth: the human heart can be as dangerous as it is fragile. We'll walk through murders, betrayals, and thefts, each one a puzzle of motive and justice, each one a mirror to the choices that define us. As you listen, let the rain drown out the world and draw you into the past. These stories are not just about crimes, they're about the people caught in their wake, the questions they leave behind, and the lessons they demand we learn. So settle in, close your eyes, and step into the darkness with us. Our first story begins in Singapore, on a night when joy turned to terror and a single act of greed changed lives forever. Part 1. The Christmas Kidnapping. Haha. Singapore, 2003. In the heart of Singapore, where order and safety are woven into the city's very fabric, December 2003 brought a crime so brazen, so unthinkable that it shattered the illusion of invincibility. This is the story of a kidnapping, a plot born of desperation, executed with chilling precision, and unraveled in a matter of hours. It's a tale of two men who gambled everything for a fleeting chance at wealth, a family thrust into a nightmare, and a little girl whose innocence became a pawn in a deadly game. Welcome to the Christmas Kidnapping, a case that still haunts those who lived through it, a reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can find a way in. Picture Singapore in late December. The streets are alive with the glow of Christmas lights, the air thick with the hum of celebration. Families gather, gifts are exchanged, and the city pulses with a rare festive warmth. In Yeo Chu Kang, a quiet residential area, a wealthy director's home is no exception. The house is grand, its windows spilling golden light onto the manicured lawn. Inside, laughter echoes as guests mingle, their voices blending with the soft chime of holiday music. At the center of it all is a 7-year-old girl, her eyes wide with the magic of Christmas, unwrapping a gift with trembling hands. She's the daughter of the director, a man whose success has built this life of comfort, a life that on this night feels untouchable. But outside, in the shadows beyond the glow, two men are watching. Tan Ping Kun, 35, and Chua Sur Lien, 42, are not here for the festivities. Their faces are taut, their eyes darting nervously as they sit in a parked car, its engine idling softly. Tan's hands grip the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. Chua in the back seat checks a coil of rope, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. These are not hardened criminals, not the kind you'd imagine plotting a crime this bold. They're ordinary men, driven to the edge by a common enemy: debt. Crippling, suffocating debt that has gnawed at their lives, leaving them desperate, reckless, and willing to cross a line few would dare. Tan and Chua weren't always like this. Tan was a factory worker, steady, unremarkable, the kind of man who blended into the crowd. Chua was a clerk, quiet, methodical, with a family he could barely support. But life in Singapore, with its relentless pace and soaring costs, had worn them down. Loans piled up, interest rates climbed, and the weight of failure pressed harder with each passing day. They met by chance, two men drowning in the same sea of despair, and in their shared misery, a plan was born. Not just any plan, a kidnapping. The target? The daughter of a wealthy director, a man whose fortune seemed to mock their own struggles. The ransom? 1 million Singapore dollars, enough to erase their debts and start anew. It was a gamble, a long shot, but to them, it was the only way out. The plan was simple, or so they thought. Christmas Day, when the city would be distracted, when families would be lost in celebration, was the perfect cover. The director's home, they'd learned, was often bustling with guests during the holidays, its security relaxed. They'd watched the house for weeks, noting routines, memorizing details. The girl, they decided, would be their leverage. Small, vulnerable, easy to control. They'd snatch her, hide her in a rented flat, make the call, collect the money, and disappear. No one would get hurt, they told themselves. It was just business, a transaction. But as they sat in that car, the weight of what they were about to do settled over them like a fog. There was no turning back. Inside the house, the party was in full swing. The director, a man in his 50s, moved through the crowd, his smile practiced but genuine. His wife, elegant in a red dress, chatted with friends, her laughter bright. Their daughter, the little girl, darted between guests, her new toy clutched tightly. No one noticed the flicker of headlights outside, the car easing closer to the gate. No one heard the soft click of the car door as Chua slipped out, his face half hidden by the plan was in motion and the clock was ticking. Chua moved quickly, his steps silent against the pavement. The gate, as expected, was unlocked, a small oversight in the chaos of the holiday. He slipped into the garden, his breath shallow, his heart pounding. The house loomed before him, its windows like eyes watching his every move. He crouched behind a hedge, waiting, listening. Inside, the girl was alone for a moment, her parents distracted by guests. This was it, the window of opportunity they'd planned for. Chua's hand tightened around the rope. He didn't want to hurt her, he told himself. Just grab her, get out, get paid. But the air felt heavy, as if the night itself knew what was coming. Man came over the car. Tan's eyes were fixed on the house. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. He muttered to himself, a mantra to steady his nerves. It'll be quick, in and out, no one gets hurt. But the words felt hollow, even to him. He glanced at the clock. 5 minutes had passed. Too long. Where was Chua? His fingers drummed the steering wheel, each tap louder, more frantic. Then a shadow moved near the gate. Chua, with the girl. She was small in his arms, her body limp, her eyes wide with terror. Tan's stomach churned. This was real now. No more planning, no more hypotheticals. They had her. Chua slid into the back seat, the girl clutched tightly. She didn't scream. Fear had stolen her voice. Her small hands gripped the edge of her dress, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Chua's face was pale, his voice low. Drive, now. Tan didn't argue. The car lurched forward, tires squealing as they sped into the night. Behind them, the house was still alive with music. Oblivious to the theft of its heart, but not for long. Inside, the director's wife was the first to notice. She called her daughter's name. Softly at first, then louder, her voice rising with panic. The guests fell silent, their smiles fading. The director pushed through the crowd, his face tight with dread. The girl's toy lay abandoned on the floor, its bright wrapping torn. A search began, frantic, disorganized. The garden, the bedrooms, the street outside. Nothing. Then, a guest found the open gate, the tire marks in the dirt. The realization hit like a blow. She was gone. The phone rang 20 minutes later. The director answered, his hand trembling. A voice, distorted, cold, spoke on the other end. $1 million. Cash. No police, or she's dead. The line went silent before he could respond. His wife collapsed, her sobs filling the room. The guests stood frozen, their festive cheer replaced by horror. The director's mind raced. $1 million. He could pay it. He had the means. But could he trust them? Would they let her go? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. Time was running out. What the kidnappers didn't know was that Singapore's police force was already mobilizing. A guest, quick thinking despite the chaos, had noted the car's make and partial license plate as it sped away. The call had been made, and within minutes, the Criminal Investigation Department was on the case. Singapore was small, its streets monitored, its police efficient. Tan and Chua had underestimated their opponent. Patrol cars fanned out, checkpoints were set up, and a net began to close around the city. Tan drove aimlessly, his nerves fraying. The girl sat silently in the back, her eyes fixed on the floor. Chua tried to reassure her, his voice strained. "Don't be scared, you'll be home soon." But the words felt like a lie, even to him. The plan was unraveling. They'd meant to take her to a safe house, a rented flat in Jurong, but the police were already too close. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing loud. Tan cursed under his breath. "They're on to us. How? How do they know?" Chua didn't answer. His hand shook as he dialed the director's number again, demanding the money, his voice cracking with desperation. The director, now surrounded by police, followed their instructions. keep them talking, stall for time. He agreed to the ransom, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. I'll get the money. Just don't hurt her, please. The police traced the call, narrowing the location to a cluster of streets in the west. Tan and Chua were running out of places to hide. The city, once their playground, was now a trap. 30 minutes into the nightmare, the police spotted the car. A patrol unit radioed in, confirming the license plate. A chase began, not with screeching tires and gunfire, but with quiet, relentless precision. Tan saw the flashing lights in his rearview mirror and panicked. We can't outrun them. What do we do? Chua's eyes darted to the girl, then to the road. We drop her. We take what we can and run. It wasn't the plan, but it was their only chance. They pulled into a quiet alley in Taman Jurong, a place where the city's polish gave way to shadows. Chua opened the door, his hands trembling. Go, he whispered to the girl. She stumbled out, her small frame shaking, and ran toward the light of a nearby street. The girl was found minutes later, unharmed but terrified by a passerby who called the police. Her parents, waiting in agony, wept with relief when the news came. But for Tan and Chua, the game was far from over. They fled, abandoning the car, their dreams of riches replaced by the cold reality of pursuit. The police, armed with descriptions and evidence, were relentless. The rented flat was raided, revealing rope, tape, and a hastily written ransom note. Fingerprints tied Tan and Chua to the scene. By dawn, both men were in custody, their faces blank with defeat. The trial was swift, as Singapore's justice system is known to be. Tan Ping Kun and Chua Serlin stood before the court, their heads bowed, their excuses hollow. The prosecution painted a damning picture. Two men who, driven by greed, had preyed on a child's vulnerability, shattering a family's peace. The defense argued desperation, claiming their debts had clouded their judgment, that they'd never intended harm. But the court was unmoved. Kidnapping for ransom carried a heavy penalty in Singapore, a nation that prided itself on order. Both men were sentenced to life imprisonment and caning, a punishment as brutal as it was symbolic. They would spend the rest of their lives behind bars, their names forever tied to a crime that shocked a nation. The little girl, whose name was never released, returned to her family, but the scars of that night lingered. Her parents, once so confident in their safe world, became vigilant, haunted by the what-ifs. The guests at the party carried the memory of their helplessness, the moment when joy turned to dread. Singapore, too, was changed. The case sparked debates about wealth inequality, about the pressures that push ordinary men to extraordinary crimes. It raised questions about security, about the small oversights, like an unlocked gate that can invite disaster. Community watch programs grew, neighbors became more vigilant, and the city tightened its grip on safety. But beyond the headlines, beyond the courtroom, there's a deeper truth to this story. Tan and Chua weren't monsters, not in the way we imagine criminals to be. They were men like any other, broken by a system that demanded more than they could give. Their crime was not just against a family, but against the trust that holds a society together. They gambled on greed and lost, but the cost was paid by a little girl who would never see Christmas the same way again, by parents who would forever fear the shadows, by a city forced to confront its own vulnerabilities. As we leave this story, consider the choices that led to that night, the moment when Tan and Chua decided to cross the line, to trade their humanity for a chance at escape, the moment when a family's joy was stolen, replaced by a fear that would never fully fade. This is the power of true crime, not just to shock, but to reveal, to show us the fragility of safety, the weight of desperation, and the enduring strength of those who survive. The Christmas kidnapping of 2003 is a story of loss, but also of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can find a way back. Part 2, The Blood Feud of Jakarta, Indonesia, 2004. In the sprawling, chaotic heart of Jakarta, where neon lights clash with shadowed alleys, January 2004 bore witness to a war that turned streets into battlegrounds. This was not a story of quiet desperation or calculated greed, but of raw, unbridled violence, a clash of egos and empires that left bodies in its wake. It's the tale of two men, John K. and Basri Sengaji, whose names became synonymous with fear in Indonesia in his underworld, with two gang leaders bound by rivalry, driven by power, and willing to burn the city to claim their throne. Welcome to the Blood Feud of Jakarta, a story of loyalty, betrayal, and a city caught in the crossfire, where the line between hunter and hunted blurred until no one was left unscathed. Imagine Jakarta in the early 2000s, a city of contrasts, teetering on the edge of modernity. Skyscrapers loom over shanty towns. Markets buzz with life, and the air hums with the promise of progress. But beneath the surface, in the narrow streets where the law's reach is weak, another world thrives. A world of gangs, of men who live by their own rules, where power is measured in blood and fear. John K. and Basri Sangaji ruled this world, each commanding a loyal army, each carving out a piece of Jakarta's underbelly. Their names were whispered in bars, feared in neighborhoods, and known to every cop who patrolled the city's darker corners. John K. was a force of nature, a man whose charisma was as dangerous as his temper. In his early 30s, he was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that could charm or chill depending on his mood. Born into poverty, K had clawed his way up through sheer will, building a gang that controlled gambling dens, protection rackets, and debt collection in East Jakarta. He was a leader who inspired devotion, his men willing to die for him, not out of fear, but out of belief. To them, K was more than a boss. He was a brother, a king, a man who promised them a share of his empire. But K's ambition had a price, and that price was conflict. Basri Sangaji, his rival, was a different kind of predator. Older, leaner, with a face weathered by years of survival, Basri was a strategist, a man who preferred cunning to brute force. His gang dominated West Jakarta, running similar rackets, but with a quieter, more calculated hand. Where K was fire, Basri was ice. His moves deliberate, his anger slow burning but deadly. His men respected him, not for warmth, but for results. Basri had a reputation for never losing, for outsmarting his enemies before they even knew they were in a fight. But like Kate, he wanted more. More territory, more power, more control. The spark that ignited their war was deceptively simple. A debt collection contract gone wrong. A wealthy businessman had hired both gangs to recover the same debt, a move either foolish or calculated to pit them against each other. Key's men moved first, securing the payment, but Basri's crew ambushed them, claiming the money as their own. The betrayal was personal. Key saw it as a challenge to his authority, a public humiliation he could. Basri saw it as a chance to weaken his rival, to show Jakarta who truly ruled. What began as a dispute over money spiraled into a feud that would stain the city red. January 10th, 1904. The night the war began, in a dimly lit bar in East Jakarta, K's territory, a group of his men gathered, their voices low, their hands resting on knives and guns. K stood at the center, his face a mask of controlled rage. Basri thinks he can take what's ours, he said, his voice steady but laced with venom. He thinks we're weak. Tonight, we show him who owns this city. His men nodded, their loyalty unshakable. They knew what was coming, bloodshed, chaos, maybe death, but for Key, they would walk into hell. Across the city, in a warehouse shrouded by darkness, Basri met with his own lieutenants. His voice was calm, almost soft, but every word carried weight. K wants a war, he said, his eyes scanning the room. He thinks he can scare us, break us. But we don't bend. We strike first, and we strike hard. His men, hardened by years in the streets, checked their weapons, machetes, pistols, homemade bombs. They were ready, not just to fight, but to send a message. Jakarta would belong to Basri, or it would burn. The first clash came at midnight in a narrow alley near Tanah Abang Market. K's men, armed and fearless, ambushed a group of Basri's crew unloading smuggled goods. The air exploded with gunfire, the clanging of metal, and the screams of the wounded. Knives flashed, bullets tore through flesh, and blood pooled on the cracked pavement. By the time the police arrived, the alley was a slaughterhouse. 3 men were dead, 5 more wounded. Their bodies sprawled among shattered crates and bullet casings. The survivors had vanished, melting into the city's labyrinth, leaving only chaos behind. And Jakarta woke to headlines of violence, but this was just the beginning. Over the next week, the war escalated. K's gang struck a gambling den in Basri's territory, torching it to the ground. Basri retaliated, bombing a bar owned by one of K's allies. Drive-by shootings became nightly rituals, each side targeting the other's strongholds. Civilians caught in the crossfire locked their doors and prayed. Shopkeepers shuttered their stalls, fearing stray bullets. The police, overwhelmed, scrambled to contain the violence, but K and Basri were ghosts, always one step ahead. Jean K was everywhere and nowhere. He moved between safe houses, his men shielding him like a king. In one meeting, he paced a cramped room, his voice rising with each word. Basri wants to play games? Fine. We hit him where it hurts. His money, his men, his name. We take it all. His lieutenants nodded, but some exchanged glances. The war was costing them. Men were dying, profits were shrinking, and the police were closing in. Kay didn't see it, or didn't care. To him, this was personal, a test of his legacy. Surrender was not an option. Basri, meanwhile, was plotting his next move. In a hidden apartment surrounded by maps and burner phones, he spoke with a cold precision. Kay's reckless. He's loud, sloppy. We wait, let him make mistakes, then we end him. His men trusted his calm, but they felt the pressure too. The body count was rising, and loyalty was fraying. Basri knew he had to act soon or risk losing everything. He sent a message to Kay, not through words, but through action. A car bomb outside one of Kay's safe houses, killing 2 of his closest men. The message was clear. No one was safe. So the police, led by Jakarta's elite mobile brigade, were desperate to stop the carnage. They raided known gang hangouts, arrested dozens, but Key and Basri remained elusive. Tips from informants led to dead ends, and the city's size worked against them. Jakarta was a maze, its slums and markets perfect hiding places for men who knew how to disappear. But the police had one advantage: technology. They tapped phones, monitored CCTV, and traced money trails. Slowly, the net tightened. On January 20, 10 days into the war, the police got a break. A low-level member of Kay's gang, wounded and scared, turned informant. He gave them Kay's location, a rundown apartment in Sakini. The raid was swift, surgical. Officers stormed the building, guns drawn, shouting for surrender. Kay, caught off guard, fought back, firing wildly before being subdued. His men scattered, some escaping, others falling to bullets or handcuffed. He, bloodied but defiant, was dragged into a police van, his empire crumbling around him. Basri, however, was another story. The police tracked him to a warehouse in West Jakarta, but when they arrived, it was empty save for a mocking note scrawled on the wall. "You're too late." Basri had vanished, his men claiming he'd fled the country. Rumors swirled. Some said he was dead, killed by his own gang for failing to win the war. Others believed he was hiding, biding his time, waiting to reclaim his throne. To this day, Basri Sengaji remains a ghost, his fate one of Jakarta's enduring mysteries. John Kay faced trial in a courtroom packed with reporters and grieving families. The charges were staggering: murder, illegal weapons possession, and organized crime. The prosecution laid out the evidence: guns, bloodstained clothes, witness testimonies. Kay's charisma couldn't save him now. He sat silently, his eyes fixed on the floor as the families of his victims wept. The defense argued he was a product of his environment, a man born into a system that offered no other path. But the court was unmoved. Kay was sentenced to life in prison, his name no longer a symbol of power, but of destruction. The war left Jakarta scarred. At least 10 men died, dozens more were injured, and entire neighborhoods lived in fear. The police cracked down harder, dismantling what remained of both gangs, but the roots of the violence, poverty, corruption, the allure of power, remained untouched. The city moved on, its wounds hidden beneath new construction and brighter lights, but for those who lived through it, the memory of those bloody nights lingered like a bad dream. What drove Kay and Basri to this point? Was it pride, the need to prove themselves in a city that chews up the weak? Was it greed, the promise of control over Jakarta's riches? Or was it something deeper, a hunger for meaning in a world that offered them none? Kay, behind bars, became a cautionary tale, a man who rose too high and fell too far. Basri, wherever he is, remains a shadow, a reminder that some stories end without answer. This feud was more than a gang war. It was a mirror held up to Jakarta, exposing its fractures. The businessmen who hired these gangs, the police who struggled to contain them, the civilians who paid the price, they were all part of the same broken system. The war showed how thin the line is between order and chaos, how quickly a city can turn on itself when power is at stake. It asked questions that still echo. How do you stop men like Kay and Basri? How do you heal a city that's bled too much? As we leave this story, think of Jakarta's streets, now quiet but never truly at peace. Think of the men who fought for nothing, who lost everything. Think of the families who buried their sons, the children who grew up in fear. The blood feud of 2004 is a story of violence, but also of consequence. A reminder that power built on blood is fleeting, and the cost is always higher than anyone expects. Somewhere in those streets, the ghosts of that war still linger, waiting for the next spark to ignite them again. Part 3, The Corporate Conspiracy, Indonesia, 2004. In the humid, bustling streets of Jakarta, where ambition and corruption intertwine like vines, January 2004 brought a crime that blurred the line between personal vengeance and corporate betrayal. This is the story of Bodi Hardo Ananto, a man whose success made him a target, whose death became a riddle, and whose killer walked free. It's a tale of greed, deception, and a justice system that faltered under the weight of doubt. A tale that asks, what happens when the truth is buried beneath layers of lies and the cost of power is paid in blood? Welcome to the murder of Bodi Hardo Ananto, a case that remains one of Indonesia's most perplexing mysteries, a shadow that lingers in the corners of a city that never sleeps. Picture Jakarta in early 2004, a city pulsing with energy and opportunity. Skyscrapers gleam under the tropical sun, their glass facades hiding the deals and desires that fuel the economy. In the heart of this metropolis, Bodi Hardo Ananto was a name that carried weight. At 42, he was the director of PT Asaba, a company supplying office equipment to businesses across Indonesia. Tall, charismatic, with a smile that disarmed and a mind that calculated, Bodi was the picture of success. His office, perched high in a corporate tower, was a testament to his rise. A mahogany desk, shelves lined with awards, and a view that stretched across the city he'd conquered. To the outside world, Bodi had it all. Wealth, influence, a family who adored him. But beneath the polished surface, cracks were forming. Cracks that would soon shatter everything. Bodi's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. His company, though profitable, was navigating turbulent waters. Rumors of financial mismanagement swirled, whispered in boardrooms and backrooms alike. Competitors were circling, eager to exploit any weakness, and Bodi himself, despite his charm, had enemies. Colleagues spoke of his ruthless streak, his willingness to cut corners to stay ahead. He'd received threats, vague, anonymous messages warning him to watch his back. But Bodi shrugged them off. In Jakarta's cutthroat business world, threats were part of the game. He was untouchable, or so he believed. On January 15, 2004, that belief was shattered. It was a Thursday, the city alive with its usual chaos, traffic snarling the streets, vendors hawking food under neon signs. Bodi spent the day in meetings, his schedule packed with negotiations and phone calls. By evening, he returned to his home in an upscale Jakarta neighborhood, a modern villa surrounded by high walls and security cameras. His wife was away visiting relatives and his children were at school. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, expectant. Bodi settled into his study, reviewing documents, unaware that this would be his final night. The next morning, a maid arrived at the villa, her key turning in the lock as it had 100 times before. She called out a greeting, expecting Bodi's usual reply. Silence. The air felt wrong, thick with an unspoken dread. She moved through the house, her steps hesitant, until she reached the study. The door was ajar. She pushed it open and froze. Bodi Hardo Ananto lay slumped on the floor, his shirt stained crimson, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, blood pooled beneath him, a stark contrast to the polished wood. The maid's scream shattered the silence, echoing through the empty house. Police swarmed the scene within hours. The study was a crime scene now, cordoned off with tape, officers moving carefully to preserve evidence. Bodi had been stabbed multiple times, the wounds deep, deliberate, suggesting rage or intent. A knife, its blade slick with blood, lay nearby, its handle wiped clean of prints. The room showed signs of a struggle. Papers scattered, a chair overturned, but no signs of forced entry. Whoever killed Bodi had been let in or had access to the house. This was no random act. This was personal. The Alwis told us about the investigation began with a flurry of questions. Who had motive? Who had opportunity? The police turned first to Bodi's inner circle. His wife, distraught and miles away, was quickly cleared. Her alibi was airtight, her grief raw. His children, too young to be suspects, were left to mourn a father they barely understood. Colleagues at PT Asaba were questioned, their faces tight with shock or something else. The company's financial records were scrutinized, revealing irregularities, missing funds, questionable deals. Had Bodi been skimming money? Had he crossed someone powerful? The police didn't know, but the deeper they dug, the murkier the waters became. One name rose to the surface: Andika Prita, a former employee of PT Asaba. At 30, Andika was a man with a chip on his shoulder. He'd been a rising star in the company, a sales manager with ambition to match Bodhi's, but a year earlier he'd been fired, accused of embezzlement. The charges were never proven, but the damage was done. Andika's career crumbled, his reputation in tatters. He blamed Bodhi, claiming his boss had framed him to cover his own tracks. Friends described Andika as bitter, obsessive, a man who spoke of revenge in quiet, venomous tones. To the police, he was the perfect suspect. Evidence began to pile up. A security camera near Bodhi's home captured a grainy image of a man matching Andika's build, leaving the villa that night. The knife found at the scene bore traces of Bodhi's blood and, crucially, Andika's fingerprints. A witness, a neighbor walking his dog, reported seeing a man lingering near the villa hours before the murder, his description aligning with Andika's. The police brought him in, their questions sharp, unrelenting. Andika denied everything. "I wasn't there," he said, his voice steady but his eyes darting. "Bodhi ruined my life, but I didn't kill him. You've got the wrong guy." The interrogation stretched into hours, then days. Andika stuck to his story, even as the evidence mounted. The fingerprints, he claimed, were a mistake. Maybe from a time he'd visited the office, though he couldn't explain how they ended up on the murder weapon. The camera footage? Too blurry to be sure. The witness? Mistaken identity. But the police weren't convinced. They searched Andika's apartment, finding a notebook filled with angry scribbles about Bodhi, words like liar and pay scrawled in jagged lines. To them, it was a roadmap to motive, a glimpse into a mind consumed by vengeance. Yet, as the case built, cracks appeared. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial, too thin to convict. The fingerprints were partial, potentially contaminated. The camera footage was inconclusive, the figure's face obscured. The witness admitted his view was fleeting, his memory clouded by the dark. And then there was the notebook. Damning, yes, but not proof of murder. Andika's lawyer went further, suggesting a conspiracy. Bodhi had enemies, he said in court, his voice rising. Powerful enemies. Andika's an easy scapegoat, a man already broken by the system. Look at PT Asaba. Look at the missing money, the threats Bodhi received. This wasn't revenge. It was a cover-up. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. A cover-up? The idea was tantalizing, even plausible. PT Asaba's financial records, now public, showed millions unaccounted for. Bodhi had been meeting with investors days before his death, negotiations that ended in heated arguments. Had he crossed a business partner? A competitor? A criminal syndicate? The threats he'd received, phone calls, letters, cryptic emails, pointed to something larger, something the police hadn't fully explored. Documents critical to the company's finances had vanished from Bodhi's office, never recovered. Was Andika a killer or a pawn in a game he didn't understand? The trial became a battle of narratives. The prosecution painted Andika as a man driven by personal betrayal, his rage spilling over into violence. They pointed to the fingerprints, the notebook, the witness, building a case that felt airtight. The defense countered with doubt, weaving a story of corporate greed and hidden players. They called witnesses former colleagues who spoke of Bodhi's shady deals. The jury, ordinary citizens thrust into a web of intrigue, listened, their faces unreadable. Jakarta watched, captivated by a case that seemed to shift with every testimony. Days turned into weeks, the courtroom a stage for truth and deception. Andika sat silently, his expression a mask of defiance and fear. He knew the stakes. Murder in Indonesia could mean life in prison, or worse. The prosecution's closing argument was brutal. Andika Prita had motive, means, and opportunity. He hated Bodhi, Hardo, and Anto, and he acted on that hate. Don't let his lies cloud the truth. The defense responded with equal force. This case is built on shadows, not facts. Bodhi's real killers are out there, hiding behind wealth and power. Don't condemn an innocent man to save their secrets. The jury deliberated for 3 days, their silence deafening. Jakarta held its breath, the city's pulse quickening with each passing hour. When the verdict came, it stunned everyone. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted, gasps, shouts, tears. Andika exhaled, his shoulders sagging, but his eyes were hollow. The jury, swayed by reasonable doubt, had chosen caution over conviction. The fingerprints weren't enough, the footage too vague, the motive too speculative. Mbika walked free, his name clear but his life forever marked by suspicion. The police were furious, the public divided. Some saw the verdict as justice, a stand against a flawed investigation. Others saw it as a failure, a murderer slipping through the cracks. Bodhi's family, seated in the front row, wept silently. His wife, her face etched with grief, spoke only once to reporters. "We'll never know the truth." But Bodhi deserved better. His children, now teenagers, carried a wound that would never heal. A father stolen by violence. His killer, or killers, still out there. The case didn't end with the verdict. It became a lightning rod for debate in Indonesia. Newspapers ran headlines questioning the justice system's limits. Was it too easy to escape conviction? Had the police rushed to pin the crime on Andika, ignoring other leads? The conspiracy theories grew. Some pointed to PT Asaba's investors, others to organized crime. A rival company, rumored to have benefited from Bodhi's death, faced scrutiny but no charge. The missing financial documents, the threats, the whispers of corruption, they hung over the case like a fog, obscuring the truth. Andika Prida disappeared from the public eye, his whereabouts unknown. Some said he left Jakarta, starting over in a quieter city. Others believed he was silenced, a loose end tied up by those who'd framed him. His notebook, entered as evidence, was dissected by amateur sleuths, its words fueling speculation. Was he a victim of circumstance or a cunning manipulator who'd outsmarted the system? No one knew, and perhaps no one ever will. Bodhi Hardo Ananto's murder exposed the underbelly of Jakarta's corporate world, a place where ambition breeds betrayal and power comes at a price. It showed how fragile trust is, how quickly a man's legacy can be tainted by secrets. PT Asaba struggled after his death, its reputation tarnished, its leadership fractured. Employees whispered of deals gone wrong, of debts unpaid. The company limped on, but Bodhi's vision, a thriving empire, faded like a dream. And the case also revealed the limits of justice in a city where influence often trumps evidence. Indonesia's legal system, still grappling with corruption and inefficiency, faced harsh criticism. Reforms were proposed. Better forensic training, stricter evidence protocols, but change was slow. The police, stung by their failure, reopened the case years later, chasing new leads but found nothing. Bodhi's file remains open, a cold case that haunts those who worked it, a reminder of the truth that slipped away. What drove this crime? Was it Andika's personal grudge, a wound festering from his firing, or was it something larger, a conspiracy woven by faceless players in boardrooms and back alleys? The evidence points both ways, a puzzle with missing pieces. Bodhi's life, his ambition, his flaws, his enemies, created a web so tangled that even death couldn't unravel it. His murder wasn't just a crime, it was a mirror held up to Jakarta, reflecting its greed, its secrets, its unrelenting hunger for more. For Bodhi's family, the pain is personal. His wife still visits his grave, laying flowers where answers should be. His children, now adults, carry his name and his loss, their lives shaped by a night they can't understand. For Andika, if he's still out there, the verdict was no victory. Freedom came at the cost of suspicion, a life forever shadowed by doubt. And for Jakarta, the case is a scar, a story told in hushed tones, a warning that truth is often the first casualty in the pursuit of power. As we leave this story, think of Bodhi Hardo Ananto, a man who built an empire only to die in its shadow. Think of Andika Prida, a man whose guilt or innocence remains a question mark. Think of the city that watched it all unfold, its heart beating with ambition and deceit. The murder of 2004 is a story of loss, but also of mystery, a reminder that some truths are buried too deep to ever be found. Somewhere in Jakarta's endless sprawl, those truths wait, silent as the city moves on, oblivious to the ghosts it left behind. Part 4, The Monster Killer. China, 2004. In the quiet towns and rural villages of northern China, where life moves slowly and trust is a currency, the years before 2004 were stained by a shadow so dark it defied comprehension. This is the story of Yang Shenhai, a man who became a nightmare, a predator who hunted in the night, leaving behind a trail of blood and broken lives. Known as the Monster Killer, he was no ordinary criminal, but a force of destruction, a man whose crimes shook a nation to its core. This is a tale of unrelenting violence, of a society blindsided by evil, and of a justice system racing to stop a killer who seemed untouchable. Welcome to the reign of the Monster Killer, a story that will chill you to the bone, a reminder that sometimes the worst monsters wear human faces. Picture rural China in the early 2000s, a landscape of rolling fields and modest homes where families lived by the rhythm of the seasons. In provinces like Hebei, Henan, Shandong, and Anhui, life is simple, unhurried. Doors are left unlocked, neighbors share meals, and the night is a time for rest, not fear. But beneath this tranquil surface, a predator was moving, unseen, unstoppable. Yang Sinhai, a man in his mid-30s, was no stranger to these villages. He drifted through them, a ghost in plain sight, his unremarkable face hiding a mind consumed by darkness. To those who passed him on the road, he was just another laborer, another wanderer. To those he chose, he was death itself. Yang Xinghai was not born a monster, or so the story goes. Born in 1968 in Henan province, he grew up in poverty, the youngest of 4 children in a family that scraped by on little. He was quiet, unassuming, a boy who kept to himself. But something shifted in his teenage years. At 16, he was arrested for theft, a petty crime that marked the beginning of a downward spiral. By his 20s, he'd been in and out of prison, convicted of burglary and rape, each sentence hardening him further. Released in 1999 after serving time for sexual assault, Yang emerged, not reformed but broken, a man who saw the world as a place of pain and himself as its avenger. He had no home, no ties, only a rage that burned quietly, waiting for release. That release came in the form of murder. Between 1999 and 2003, Yang Xinhai embarked on a killing spree that would claim 67 lives, making him one of China's deadliest serial killers. His method was chillingly simple. He targeted rural homes, places where families slept soundly, their doors unbolted, their trust absolute. He moved at night, armed with tools as crude as they were lethal. Hammers, knives, axes, shovels. He didn't plan his attacks with meticulous care. He chose his victims at random, drawn to the glow of a window or the isolation of a house. To Yang, it didn't matter who they were, men, women, children, the elderly. All were prey. The first known attack came in 1999 in a village in Shandong. A family of 4, a farmer, his wife, their 2 young sons, went to bed like any other night. By morning, they were gone, their bodies hacked apart, the walls of their home splattered with blood. The scene was chaos, a slaughterhouse where no one had been spared. Neighbors, horrified, called the police, who arrived to find no witnesses, no fingerprints, no clues. The killer had vanished, leaving only death behind. The village mourned, assuming it was a one-time tragedy, a robbery gone wrong. They couldn't know it was just the beginning. Over the next 4 years, the pattern repeated. In Henan, a grandmother and her grandchildren were bludgeoned in their sleep. In Hubei, a couple and their daughter were stabbed, their bodies left in a field. In Anhui, an entire family of 6, from a toddler to a great-grandfather, was massacred with an axe. Each crime was more brutal than the last, the violence escalating as Young's hunger grew. He didn't steal much, a few yuan, some food, suggesting the killing itself was his reward. Survivors, rare and traumatized, spoke of a man who moved like a shadow, striking without warning, his face blank, his eyes empty. By 2003, the body count was staggering. 67 dead, 23 injured, 10 raped. The police across 4 provinces were grappling with a crisis they couldn't name. At first, they didn't connect the crimes. The villages were scattered, the methods varied, and China's vastness made coordination difficult. But patterns emerged. Nighttime attacks, rural settings, entire families targeted. Whispers of a serial killer began to spread, first among investigators, then in the public. Panic took root. Villages that once left doors open now barred them shut. Families slept in shifts, clutching knives. The monster killer, as the press dubbed him, was no longer a man, but a myth, a demon who struck without reason. Yang Xinhai's life during these years was a study in invisibility. He worked odd jobs, construction, farming, anything that paid in cash and asked no questions. He rode a bicycle between towns, its rusty frame a stark contrast to the horror he carried. He stayed in cheap hostels, blending into the crowds of migrant workers who filled China's margins. When questioned later, those who met him described him as quiet, forgettable. A man who never lingered long, but beneath that facade, Yang was meticulous in his own way. He avoided cities with their cameras and crowds, choosing places where isolation was his ally. He left no calling card, no taunt for the police. His only signature was the carnage itself. The police, under pressure from a terrified public, formed a task force. They combed crime scenes, interviewed survivors, and chased leads that led nowhere. Yang's randomness was his shield. Without a clear motive or pattern, he was a ghost. But in October 2003, a breakthrough came, small but critical. In Changzhou, Hebei, a woman survived an attack, her injuries severe but not fatal. She described her attacker, medium build, short hair, a face she'd never forget. Her description matched a man seen loitering in a nearby village, a drifter named Yang Qinhai, recently arrested for a minor theft but released. The police had their suspect. Well, tracking Yang was no easy task. He was a nomad, his movements unpredictable. But the task force was relentless. Following tips from informants and cross-referencing records on November 3, 2003, they found him in a karaoke bar in Kangzhou, sipping a beer, his demeanor calm, almost serene. When officers approached, he didn't resist. His hands, calloused from years of labor, went up without a fight. In his bag, they found a knife, its blade stained with dried blood. Yang Xinhai, the monster killer, was finally in chains. The interrogation was a descent into horror. Yang confessed without hesitation, his voice flat, detached, as if recounting someone else's life. "I killed them because I wanted to," he said, his words chilling the room. "They were there, so I did it." He detailed 67 murders, recalling names, dates, and methods with eerie precision. He spoke of breaking into homes, of watching families sleep before striking. He described the weight of a hammer in his hand, the sound of a blade meeting flesh. When asked why, he shrugged. "Life didn't give me anything. Why should I give it to them?" To Yang, his victims were not people, but obstacles. Their deaths a release for a rage he couldn't name. The police were stunned, not just by the scale of his crimes, but by his lack of remorse. Yang showed no guilt, no fear, only a cold acceptance of his fate. He claimed he'd acted alone, dismissing theories of accomplices. He spoke of his past, prison, rejection, a girlfriend who left him but offered no excuses. "I was angry," he said simply. "Killing felt good." Psychologists later diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, but labels couldn't explain the void in his soul. Yan Shanai was not a mastermind or a tortured genius. He was a man who chose to destroy, and that choice made him a monster. The trial was swift, a formality in a country where justice for such crimes is uncompromising. In February 2004, Yang stood before a court in Luohe, Henan, his face impassive as the charges were read. 67 counts of murder, 23 counts of intentional injury, 10 counts of rape, and 5 counts of robbery. The courtroom was packed, not with mourners, most victims' families were too broken to attend, but with reporters and curious citizens drawn to the man who terrorized a nation. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, survivor testimonies, blood-stained weapons, Yang's own confessions. The defense offered little, arguing only that Yang's mental state warranted leniency. The court disagreed. On February 14, 2004, Yang Xinhai was sentenced to death. He showed no reaction, his eyes fixed on some distant point. 2 weeks later, he was executed by firing squad, his body disposed of without ceremony. The monster killer was gone, but the wounds he left behind would not heal so easily. Families across 4 provinces buried their loved ones, their grief compounded by the randomness of their loss. Villages once defined by trust became fortresses, their doors barred, their nights sleepless. China, a nation on the cusp of global power, was forced to confront a darkness it hadn't seen coming. The case sparked a reckoning. How had Yang evaded capture for so long? Why had rural communities been so vulnerable? The police faced criticism for their slow response, their failure to connect the crime sooner. Reforms followed. Better coordination between provinces, increased patrols in remote areas, and public awareness campaigns about home security. But the deeper questions lingered. What drove Yang Shanai? Was it poverty, prison, or something innate, a flaw in his very being? Criminologists debated his motives, some calling him a product of China's rapid modernization, a man left behind by progress, others seeing him as a rare, unredeemable evil. For the victims' families, answers offered no comfort. A mother in Shandong spoke of her two sons killed as they slept, their dreams stolen by a stranger's hand. "I see them every night," she said, her voice breaking. "I locked the door, but he's still there." A farmer in Henan, who lost his wife and daughter, abandoned his land, unable to live where their blood was spilled. These were not just deaths, but ruptures, tearing apart the fabric of communities that had once felt safe. The monster killer didn't just take lives. He took peace, trust, the illusion of security. Yang's crimes also exposed the fragility of rural China, where economic growth hadn't yet reached every corner. His victims were often the poorest, their homes defenseless against a determined intruder. The case prompted discussions about inequality, about the gaps in law enforcement that allowed a killer to roam free. It forced a nation to look at its margins, at the drifters like Yang who moved unseen, their anger festering until it exploded. China tightened its grip on more cameras, more checkpoints, but the fear Yang left behind was harder to erase. What makes this story so chilling is its randomness. Yang Xinhai didn't know his victims, didn't hate them, didn't need a reason. He killed because he could, because the act filled a void nothing else could. His crimes were not about greed or revenge, but about power, the ultimate control over life and death. He was not a master criminal, not a genius evading capture with cunning. He was ordinary, forgettable, a man you'd pass without a second glance, and that's what makes him terrifying, the idea that evil can be so mundane, so close, hiding in the face of a stranger. The monster killer's legacy is one of loss, but also of resilience. The villages he targeted rebuilt, slowly, painfully. Families mourned, but some found strength in memory, honoring their loved ones with small acts of defiance. Planting gardens, lighting lanterns, refusing to let fear win. The police, humbled by their failures, learned. Adapting to a world where such threats could emerge without warning, China moved forward, its cities growing, its rural heart beating on. But the shadow of Yang Xinhai remains, a reminder of what lurks when trust is broken. As we leave this story, think of those quiet villages, their lights dimmed by loss. Think of the families who wake each night listening for footsteps that never come. Think of Yang Xinhai, a man who chose to destroy, whose name became a synonym for horror. The Monster Killer of 2004 is a story of violence, but also of survival, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. Somewhere in those fields, those homes, the echoes of his crimes linger, a warning that evil, once unleashed, leaves scars that time can only soften, never erase. Part 5, The Battle of Sovereignty, United States, 2004. In the windswept plains of North Dakota, where the Spirit Lake Reservation stretches under an endless sky, a single act of violence in 2001 set off a chain of events that would echo through courtrooms and history. This is the story of Billy Joe Lara, a man whose rage sparked a crime, whose defiance challenged a nation, and whose case redefined the boundaries of justice. It's a tale of a brutal assault, a clash of legal systems, and a Supreme Court decision that asked, who has the power to judge when worlds collide? Welcome to United States v. Lara, a story that is as much about a man's downfall as it is about the enduring struggle for sovereignty, a shadow that stretches across the heart of America's tribal lands. Picture the Spirit Lake Reservation in 2001, a place where tradition and hardship coexist. The land is vast, dotted with modest homes and community centers, its people bound by a shared history of resilience. The Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, to which Billy Joe Lara belonged, called this place home, though Lara himself was an outsider in more ways than one. At 32, he was a man adrift, his life marked by petty crimes and personal struggles. Married to a woman from the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, Lara lived on the reservation, but his presence was uneasy, his reputation tarnished by a temper that flared without warning. The reservation, governed by its own laws and policed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, was a world apart from the rest of America, yet it could not escape the tensions that simmered within. Billy Joe Lara was no stranger to trouble. Born into the Turtle Mountain Band, he grew up in a community scarred by poverty and historical trauma. His record was a patchwork of minor offenses: theft, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, none serious enough to mark him as a dangerous man, but enough to make him a familiar face to tribal police. By 2001, he had settled on the Spirit Lake Reservation, hoping for a fresh start with his wife and young children. But the weight of his past followed him, and the reservation's close-knit community was quick to judge. Lara felt the eyes on him, the whispers that he didn't belong. That sense of alienation, that simmering resentment, would soon explode into violence. On the morning of June 13, 2001, the air was heavy with the promise of summer. The Spirit Lake Reservation was quiet, its streets empty save for the occasional car. At the tribal police station, Officer Byron B.J. Rainbow, a Bureau of Indian Affairs officer, was preparing for a routine shift. In his late 20s, Rainbow was respected. A man who balanced authority with empathy. His job was to keep the peace, a task that often meant navigating the delicate line between tribal law and federal oversight. He knew Lara had dealt with him before. Small infractions, heated arguments that fizzled out, but today would be different. Lara woke that morning in a storm of his own making. The night before, he'd argued with his wife, their voices carrying through the thin walls of their home. The fight was over money or fidelity or the countless small grievances that piled up in a strained marriage. Whatever the cause, it left Lara seething, his anger spilling over into the dawn. He drank, though how much is unclear, and by mid-morning he was restless, pacing the reservation's dusty roads. His path took him near the police station where a confrontation was waiting to unfold. The details of what happened next are murky, pieced together from witness accounts and court records. Around 10 a.m., Lara approached the station, his steps unsteady, his voice loud. He was looking for someone. Maybe his wife, maybe an officer he blamed for some slight. Officer Rainbow, on duty, stepped outside to confront him. "Billy, you need to calm down," Rainbow said, his tone firm but measured. "You're causing a scene." Lara's response was a string of curses, his fists clenched, his face twisted with rage. The situation escalated fast, words turning to shouts, shouts turning to action. What happened in those next moments would change everything. Lara lunged at Rainbow, his fists swinging with a fury that caught the officer off guard. Rainbow, trained and fit, fought back, but Lara's rage was unrelenting. Witnesses, passers-by, other officers saw the two men grappling, their struggle kicking up dust in the morning sun. Lara landed blow after blow, his strength fueled by something deeper than alcohol or anger. Rainbow fell, his hands striking the ground, and Lara didn't stop. He kicked, punched, and stomped, his attack savage, unyielding. By the time other officers pulled Lara off, Rainbow was barely conscious, his face bloodied, his body limp. The reservation erupted in chaos. Officers restrained Lara, his wrists cuffed, his eyes still burning with defiance. Rainbow was rushed to a hospital, his injuries severe. Broken ribs, a concussion, internal bruising. He would survive, but the scars, physical and emotional, would linger. Lara was arrested, charged by the tribal court with assault and public intoxication. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, acting under its own authority, prosecuted him swiftly. In a matter of weeks, Lara pleaded guilty, receiving a 90-day sentence in a tribal jail and a fine. It was a standard punishment for a tribal offense, a resolution that should have closed the case. But this was only the beginning. What followed was a legal odyssey that would reach the highest court in the land. The federal government, overseeing crimes on reservations through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, took notice of Lara's case. The assault on Rainbow wasn't just a tribal matter. Rainbow was a federal officer making the crime a federal offense. Prosecutors in Bismarck, North Dakota, indicted Lara for assaulting a federal officer, a charge that carried a potential 7-year sentence. Lara, now facing a second prosecution for the same act, cried foul. "I've already been punished," he told his lawyer, his voice thick with frustration. "They can't try me again, that's not fair." Lara's defense hinged on a principle as old as American law: double jeopardy, the constitutional protection against being tried twice for the same crime. The Fifth Amendment was clear: no one could face twice, put in jeopardy of life or limb for the same offense. Lara argued that his tribal conviction should bar the federal prosecution. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, he claimed, was a sovereign entity, its courts equal to those of the United States. If the tribe had already judged him, the federal government had no right to try him again. It was a bold argument, one that struck at the heart of tribal sovereignty and its place in the American legal system. The federal government saw it differently. Prosecutors argued that the tribe's authority came from Congress, not from inherent sovereignty. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe's court, they claim, was an extension of federal power, not a separate entity. Thus, Lara's tribal conviction didn't trigger double jeopardy protections. The federal case could proceed, they insisted, because the tribe's prosecution wasn't truly sovereign. This wasn't just a legal technicality, it was a direct challenge to the tribe's autonomy, a question of whether Native nations could stand as equals in the eyes of the law. The district court in North Dakota sided with the government. Lara's motion to dismiss the federal charges was denied, and he was convicted in 2002, sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. But Lara, defiant to the end, appealed, taking his case to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. There, in a surprising turn, the judges agreed with him. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, they ruled, was a sovereign entity for double jeopardy purposes. Lara's tribal conviction barred the federal prosecution. The decision was a victory for tribal sovereignty, but it also threw the case into legal limbo, raising questions that only the Supreme Court could answer. In 2003, the United States appealed to the Supreme Court, and the case of United States v. Lara was born. By 2004, the nation's highest court was set to decide a question that went far beyond one man's crime. Did a tribal conviction for an offense preclude federal prosecution for the same act under double jeopardy? The implications were staggering. A ruling for Lara could affirm tribal sovereignty, giving Native nations greater control over their lands and people. A ruling against him could reinforce federal dominance, limiting tribal authority to the whims of Congress. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, the Turtle Mountain Band, and Native communities across the country watched their future hanging in the balance. Supreme Court heard arguments in January 2004, the justices probing both sides with surgical precision. Lara's lawyer argued passionately the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe is a sovereign nation with its own laws, its own courts. To deny this is to deny their identity. The government countered tribal authority is delegated by Congress, not inherent. Allowing double prosecutions ensures justice without undermining federal law. The justices, their faces unreadable, listened, their questions sharp, their silences heavy. Behind the legal jargon was a deeper truth. This case was about power, about who gets to define justice in a nation built on contested land. On April 19, 2004, the Supreme Court delivered its decision, a 7-2 ruling that would reshape the legal landscape. Justice Stephen Breyer, writing for the majority, sided with the government. The Spirit Lake Sioux tribe's authority, he wrote, was derived from Congress, not from inherent sovereignty. Because tribal and federal prosecution stemmed from different sources of power, double jeopardy did not apply. Lara's federal conviction was upheld, his sentence reinstated. The ruling was a blow to tribal advocates who saw it as a step backward, a reminder that Native nations remained under federal control. But the decision wasn't a total loss for tribes. Breyer's opinion included a crucial clarification. Congress could restore inherent tribal sovereignty through legislation, as it had done with the 1990 AIE amendments to the Indian Civil Rights Act. This opened the door for future battles, a chance for tribes to reclaim their authority. For Lara, however, the ruling was the end of the line. He served his federal sentence, his name forever tied to a case that outlived his crime. Released in 2005, he faded from public view, his life a footnote in a larger struggle. The impact of the United States versus Lara rippled far beyond North Dakota. Tribal leaders, while disappointed, used the ruling to push for legislative change, advocating for greater autonomy. The case highlighted the complexities of reservation justice, where tribal, federal, and state systems overlap, often at the expense of clarity. It exposed the challenges faced by officers like BJ Rainbow, who navigate dual roles as tribal and federal enforcers. Rainbow, fully recovered, continued his work, but the attack left him wary, a reminder of the risks he faced. For the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, the case was a bittersweet moment. Their sovereignty was affirmed in theory but constrained in practice. The reservation moved on, its people resilient, their traditions enduring despite the legal setbacks. Lara's family, caught in the crossfire, struggled with his legacy. A husband and father whose anger cost him everything. The assault, though a single act, became a symbol of larger tensions between native and non-native, between freedom and control, between justice and power. What drove Billy Joe Lara that June morning? Was it the weight of a life spent on the margins, the resentment of being an outsider in his wife's community? Was it the alcohol, the argument, or something deeper, a rage born of historical wounds? His crime was not murder, not the kind of horror that fills headlines, but its consequences were profound. It forced a nation to confront questions it had long avoided. How do you balance sovereignty with accountability? How do you honor the past while navigating the present? Lara's story is not just about a man, but about a system, a people, a fight that continues to this day. Spirit Lake Reservation still stands, its plains stretching under that same endless sky. Officer Rainbow, now older, carries the memory of that day, a scar that fades but never vanishes. Lara, wherever he is, lives with the weight of his choices, a man who challenged the law and lost. And the Supreme Court's ruling, etched into legal history, remains a touchstone, a reminder that justice is never simple when it's built on contested ground. As we leave this story, think of the reservation, its quiet strength, its unspoken pain. Think of Billy Joe Lara, a man whose anger sparked a reckoning. Think of the courts, the laws, the people caught in their web, the United States. Versus Lara is a story of violence, but also of principle, a testament to the enduring fight for identity and justice in a world that too often forgets. Somewhere on those plains, the winds still carry the echoes of that struggle, whispering of a sovereignty that refuses to be silenced. Part 6. The Cold Case of Mizuto Harada, Japan, 2004. In the quiet, orderly streets of rural Japan, where tradition holds sway and safety is a promise, the spring of 2004 brought a crime that shattered a community's peace. This is the story of Mizuto Harada, a young woman whose life was stolen in a moment of inexplicable violence, whose death became a mystery that haunted a nation for over a decade. It's a tale of a random act of brutality, a relentless pursuit of justice, and a truth that emerged from the shadows only when science caught up with the past. Welcome to the Cold Case of Mizuto Harada, a story that will grip your heart and chill your soul. A reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can strike without warning. Picture Chiba Prefecture in April 2004, a region of rolling hills and sleepy villages, where life moves at a gentle pace. The cherry blossoms are fading, their petals drifting on the breeze, and the air carries the soft hum of spring. In a small town, Mizuto Harada, 21 years old, is a bright spot in this quiet world. She's a university student studying literature, her days filled with books and dreams of a future she's only beginning to imagine. With her warm smile and curious eyes, Mizuto is loved by her family, cherished by her friends, and known for her kindness. A girl who stops to help a neighbor, who writes poetry in her spare time, who believes the world is good. Mizuto lives with her parents in a modest home, its walls lined with photos of her childhood. Her father, a school teacher, is proud of her intellect. Her mother, a homemaker, treasures her gentleness. On April 17, 2004, a Saturday, Mizuto is home for the weekend. Her university class is on pause. The day is ordinary. She spends the morning reading, the afternoon chatting with her mother over tea. By evening, she decides to take a walk, a habit she's kept since childhood. "I'll be back before dinner," she says, her voice light, her jacket slung over her shoulder. Her mother nods, watching her daughter step into the fading light, unaware that those would be her final words. The town is quiet as Mizuto walks, the streets familiar, the house is glowing with warmth. She passes a convenience store, its neon sign flickering, and waves to a clerk who knows her by name. She turns down a narrow path near a wooded area, a shortcut she's taken countless times. The air is cool, the sky deepening to dusk. Mizuto hums softly, her thoughts drifting to her studies, her plans, her life, stretching out before her. She doesn't see the figure watching from the trees, doesn't hear the footsteps closing in. She doesn't know that this moment, this fleeting second, will change everything. The next morning, a jogger finds her. Mizuto Harada lies in a ditch beside the path, her body still, her face pale against the earth. Her clothes are torn, her hands bruised, her life extinguished by a violence so brutal it defies understanding. She's been beaten and strangled, her neck bearing the marks of a cord or a rope. The scene is a wound in the town's heart, a place where beauty and horror collide. The jogger, trembling, calls the police, his voice breaking as he describes what he's seen. Within hours, the path is cordoned off, officers moving with grim precision, their faces tight with shock. The Chiba, prefectural police take charge, their investigation fueled by urgency and grief. Mizuto's body tells a story of struggle. She fought her attacker, her nails scraping skin, her body resisting until the end. Evidence is scarce but telling. Traces of blood not her own, a few fibers from a dark fabric, a partial footprint in the mud. The attack was swift, the killer efficient, leaving no witnesses, no clear motive. Was it a robbery, a personal vendetta, a random act? The police don't know, but they know this. Mizuto was targeted, her life stolen in a moment of calculated cruelty. The town reels, its sense of safety shattered. Mizuto's family is devastated, her parents collapsing under the weight of loss. Her father, his voice hollow, speaks to reporters. She was our light. Who could do this? Why? Her mother, unable to speak, clutches Mizuto's favorite scarf, its fabric worn from years of love. Friends gather at the Harada home, their tears mingling with memories of a girl who deserved better, and the community, small and tight-knit, locks its doors, its trust eroded by a crime that feels like a betrayal. Mizuto's death is not just a tragedy, it's a violation, a reminder that evil can touch even the purest hearts. The police chase every lead. They interview neighbors, friends, classmates, searching for anyone who might have held a grudge. Mizuto, they learn, had no enemies, no secrets, no reason to be a target. Her life was open, her routines predictable. The path where she died was a place she walked often, a detail that suggests her killer knew her habits or chose her by chance. The blood under her nails is a beacon of hope. DNA, a new tool in 2004, could hold the key. But Japan's forensic capabilities are limited, the sample too small for the technology of the time. The police store it, praying for a future breakthrough. Days turn to weeks, weeks to months. The investigation grows cold, the case a weight on the shoulders of detectives who refuse to give up. Mizuto's face appears on posters, her smile a haunting reminder of what was lost. The police question transients, local troublemakers, even out-of-town visitors, but no one fits the profile. A suspect emerges, a drifter seen near the town that night, but his alibi holds. His DNA a mismatch, steps pour in, each one a flicker of hope, each one a dead end. The Harada family waits, their grief tempered by a desperate need for answers. The town, once vibrant, grows quiet, its spirit dimmed by fear. Years pass and Mizuto's case becomes a ghost story, a cautionary tale told to young women about the dangers of walking alone. Her parents age, their eyes carrying a sorrow that never fades. Her father visits the path where she died, leaving flowers, whispering apologies for a world that failed her. Her mother keeps Mizuto's room untouched, a shrine to a life cut short. The police, under pressure to solve other crimes, shift resources, but a small team remains dedicated, their files thick with notes, their resolve unbroken. They believe the killer is out there, hiding, waiting for time to erase his tracks. And in 2018, a miracle. Advances in DNA technology, now capable of analyzing minute samples, breathed new life into cold cases across Japan. The Chiba police, still haunted by Mizuto's murder, resubmit the blood from her nails. The sample, preserved for 14 years, yields a profile. It's run through a national database. A long shot in a country where such databases are limited, but the system pings. A match. The name. Hiroshi Tanaka, a 45-year-old laborer living in Tokyo, a man with a minor criminal record but no history of violence. The police are cautious, wary of false hope, but the match is strong, the odds astronomical. Tanaka is no one special, or so it seems. A loner, he works construction jobs, moving between cities, his life a series of temporary addresses. In 2004, he was in Chiba, working on a road project near Mizuto's town. His record shows arrests for theft and public intoxication, but nothing to suggest murder. Yet the DNA is undeniable, a silent witness to a crime he thought he'd escaped. The police track him down, their approach careful, their suspicions high. On a gray morning in October 2018, they knock on his apartment door, their badges gleaming, their questions ready. Tanaka's reaction is telling. He's calm at first, his face a mask of confusion. Mizuto Harada. Never heard of her, he says, his voice steady, but his hands trembling. The police press, mentioning the DNA, the blood, the night in 2004. Tanaka's composure cracks, his eyes darting to the door, his breath quickening. He denies everything, but his story unravels, gaps in his timeline, contradictions in his whereabouts. The police search his apartment, finding nothing definitive, but noting his sparse transient life, a man who owns little and leaves no trace. They take him into custody, their hope tempered by the challenge ahead. The interrogation is a chess game. Tanaka, cornered, weaves a tale of innocence. I was in Chiba, sure, but I didn't know her. Maybe I cut myself, maybe my blood got mixed up somehow. The police counter was science, the DNA's specificity, the improbability of coincidence. Hours pass, then days. Tanaka's defiance softens, his voice growing quiet. Finally, he breaks. I didn't mean to kill her, he whispers, his head bowed. It was an impulse. I saw her. I followed her. I don't know why. His confession is sparse, lacking the detail of remorse, but it's enough. He describes the cord he used, the struggle, the moment Mizuto's life has slipped away. He claims it was a one-time act, a mistake, but his eyes tell a different story. A man who's carried a secret for too long. The trial, held in 2019, is a media frenzy. Japan, a nation that prides itself on safety, is riveted by the case, a cold case solved by science and persistence. Tanaka stands before the court, his face gaunt, his silence damning. The prosecution lays out the evidence, the DNA, the confession, the timeline that places him at the scene. They paint him as a predator, a man who saw Mizuto's vulnerability and acted without conscience. The defense argues mental instability, claiming Tanaka was drunk, confused, not himself that night. But the court is unmoved. Mizuto's family, seated in the gallery, listen, their faces etched with pain and relief. Her father speaks, his voice steady. We waited 14 years for this. Mizuto can rest now. The judge delivers a life sentence, a rare punishment in Japan's measured justice system. Tanaka shows no emotion, his fate sealed, his name now a footnote in a tragedy that defined a town. The Harada family finds no joy in the verdict, only closure, a chance to mourn without the weight of the unknown. Mizuto's mother, clutching her daughter's scarf, whispers, "We miss you," as if Mizuto can hear. The town, long scarred by the crime, breathes a collective sigh, its faith in justice restored, if only slightly. The case of Mizuto Harada did more than solve a murder. It reshaped Japan's approach to crime. The DNA breakthrough spurred investment in forensic technology, making cold cases a priority. It highlighted the vulnerability of rural areas where safety was once taken for granted. Community patrols grew, women's safety programs expanded, and public awareness shifted. The case also sparked debates about justice for foreign suspects, as early theories had pointed to outsiders revealing biases in the system. Mizuto's death, though senseless, became a catalyst for change, a legacy her family embraced as they healed. But the questions remain. Why Mizuto? Was Tanaka truly a one-time killer, or did other victims go undiscovered? His confession, vague and self-serving, offers no insight into his mind, no explanation for the rage that ended a young woman's life. Was it chance, a fleeting impulse, or something darker, a pattern, interrupted by his arrest? The police, wary of loose ends, reviewed other unsolved cases but found no links. Tanaka's silence, his refusal to explain, leaves a void that haunts those who seek answers. For Mizuto's family, the pain is eternal. Her father still walks the path where she died. His flowers, a quiet tribute. Her mother keeps her room as it was, a space where memories live. Her friends, now adults, carry her spirit. Their lives shaped by a loss that taught them the world's cruelty. The town, though healed, is changed, its innocence tempered by caution. Japan, too, bears the mark of Mizuto's story, a reminder that safety is fragile, that justice, though delayed, can prevail. What drove Hiroti Tanaka that April night? Was it a moment of madness, a life of frustration boiling over, or a darkness he'd always carried? His crime was not just against Mizuto, but against a community, a nation, a belief in the goodness of the everyday. Mizuto Harada's life was a light, brief but brilliant, and her death a shadow that lingered until truth brought it to an end. Her story is not just about loss, but about perseverance, about the human need to seek justice, to honor the fallen, to keep the light alive. As we leave this story, think of Mizuto Harada walking that path, her heart full of dreams. Think of her family waiting through years of silence, finding solace in a truth hard won. Think of Hiroshite Tanaka, a man who chose to destroy, whose reasons died with him. The cold case of 2004 is a story of tragedy, but also of triumph, a testament to the power of science, the strength of love, and the enduring hope that even the darkest mysteries can find their way to the light. Somewhere in Chiba's quiet fields, Mizuto's spirit lingers, a whisper of peace in a world that never forgot her. Part 7, The Price of Betrayal. Japan, 2004. In the neon-lit sprawl of Tokyo, where ambition fuels dreams and betrayal lurks in every shadow, the summer of 2004 bore witness to a crime that cut through the heart of the city's elite. This is the story of Yukar Kuroda, a businessman whose success made him a target, whose life was stolen by a man he once trusted. It's a tale of greed, obsession, and a grudge that festered until it exploded in violence. A tale that asks what happens when ambition turns to envy and the cost of betrayal is paid in blood. Welcome to the murder of Yukar Kuroda, a story that will draw you into the dark underbelly of corporate Japan, a reminder that even the brightest lies can be extinguished by the shadows they cast. Picture Tokyo in July 2004, a city pulsing with energy, its skyscrapers gleaming against a humid sky, the streets hum with the rhythm of commerce, salarymen in crisp suits, taxis weaving through traffic, neon signs flashing promises of wealth and pleasure. In this world of high stakes and higher expectations, Yukar Kuroda was a titan. At 45, he was the CEO of a thriving tech firm, a man who built an empire from nothing. Charismatic, driven, with a mind as sharp as his tailored suits, Kuroda was the embodiment of Japan's economic miracle. His office, perched in a glass tower in Shinjuku, was a shrine to his success. Polished floors, modern art, a view that stretched to the horizon. To the world, he had it all. A loving wife, 2 teenage children, a reputation that opened doors. But beneath the surface, secrets simmered, and one man's resentment was about to boil over. Yukar Kuroda's life was a carefully crafted facade. His company, specializing in software solutions, was profitable but not without its struggles. The tech boom of the early 2000s had brought fierce competition, and Kuroda's ruthless streak, his willingness to outmaneuver rivals, had earned him enemies. His personal life, too, was fraying. Rumors of an affair with a young employee had reached his wife, Haruko, straining their marriage. Financial irregularities at the company, whispered among board members, hinted at embezzlement, though no one dared accuse Kuroda openly. He was untouchable, or so he thought, a man who believed his charm and power could shield him from any storm. But one man saw through the facade. Dai Yoshida, Kuroda's former business partner. At 42, Yoshida was a shadow of the man he'd once been. A decade earlier, he and Kuroda had co-founded the company, their dreams of innovation binding them like brothers. Yoshida, the quieter of the two, handled operations, while Kuroda, the charismatic frontman, secured deals. Together, they were unstoppable, until a deal went sour. In 2000, a major contract with a multinational collapsed, costing millions. Kuroda blamed Yoshida, accusing him of mismanagement. The board sided with Kuroda, and Yoshida was forced out, his shares bought at a fraction of their value, his name erased from the company's story. To Yoshida, it was betrayal, a wound that never healed. Yoshida's life unraveled after that. His savings dwindled, his marriage crumbled, and his attempts to start anew failed. He drifted through Tokyo, taking odd jobs, his once sharp mind consumed by bitterness. Friends described him as a man obsessed, his conversations circling back to Kuroda, his voice thick with venom. "He stole everything," Yoshida would say, his hands trembling. "My work, my future, my life." In his small, cluttered apartment, he kept clippings of Kuroda's success, magazine covers, press releases, photos of the man who ruined him. To Yoshida, Kuroda's rise was a mockery, a daily reminder of what he'd lost. By 2004, that resentment had hardened into something darker, something deadly. Plan took shape in the quiet of Yoshida's mind. He knew Kuroda's routines, his habits unchained from their years together. Kuroda lived in a sleek townhouse in Meguro, a wealthy Tokyo neighborhood, its security lax despite his status. Yoshida watched from a distance, noting the times Kuroda left for work, the evenings he spent alone. He bought a gun, a rare and illegal purchase in Japan's tightly controlled society, its weight a promise of retribution. He told himself it was justice, not murder, a reckoning for a debt that could only be paid in blood. But as the day approached, doubt crept in, a flicker of the man he'd once been. Could he do this? Could he cross that line? The answer came on July 12, 2004, a night that would change everything. It was a Monday, the city sweltering under a summer haze. Kuroda spent the day in meetings, his charisma masking the strain of a looming audit. By evening, he returned home, his wife and children away at a family retreat. The townhouse was quiet, its lights casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Kuroda poured a whiskey, settling into his study, unaware that death was closing in. Outside, Yoshida stood in the alley behind the house, his heart pounding, the gun heavy in his pocket. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now, with the reality before him, his hands shook. He took a breath, steadied himself, and moved toward the back door. The door was unlocked, a small oversight in Kuroda's otherwise meticulous life. Yoshida slipped inside, his steps silent, the house swallowing him like a secret. He found Kuroda in the study, his back to the door, engrossed in papers. Yoshida's voice, low and trembling, broke the silence. "Yuka!" Kuroda turned, his eyes widening, a mix of recognition and confusion. "Dae! What are you doing here?" As if the words were calm, but fear crept into Kuroda's tone. Yoshida didn't answer. He raised the gun, his hand steady now, his resolve hardened. "You took everything from me," he said, his voice a hiss. "Now, it's my turn." What happened next was swift and brutal. Kuroda stood, his hands raised, pleading. "Dae, we can talk. Whatever you need, I'll help." But Yoshida was beyond reason, his anger a tidal wave. He fired once, the bullet striking Kuroda's chest, then again, the second shot piercing his heart. Kuroda collapsed, his whiskey glass shattering on the floor, his blood pooling on the polished wood. Yoshida stood over him, his breath ragged, the gun still in his hand. For a moment, he felt nothing. No relief, no triumph, just emptiness. Then panic set in. He fled, the gun tossed into a dumpster, his mind racing as he vanished into Tokyo's labyrinth. The next morning, neighbor noticed Kuroda's gate ajar, an unusual sight in the orderly neighborhood. She knocked, called out, then peered through a window. The sight of Kuroda's body, sprawled in the study, sent her reeling. Police swarmed the scene, their faces grim as they surveyed the carnage. The study was a snapshot of violence, bloodstains, bullet casings, a shattered glass. Kuroda had been dead for hours, his body cold, his face frozen in shock. The lack of forced entry suggested the killer knew him, had been let in, or had access. This was no random crime. It was personal, deliberate, a message written in blood. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police launched a relentless investigation. Kuroda's life was dissected, his secrets laid bare. His wife, Haruko, was questioned, her grief raw, but her alibi solid. She'd been hours away, unaware of the affair rumors until now. Colleagues at the company spoke of financial strain, of Kuroda's aggressive tactics, but none had a clear motive for murder. The audit, they admitted, had uncovered discrepancies, but nothing to warrant this. The police turned to Kuroda's past, and one name stood out: Dai Yoshida, the partner he'd cast aside, a man whose bitterness was no secret. Yoshida was their prime suspect, but finding him was another matter. He'd vanished, his apartment empty, his phone disconnected. The police traced his movements, interviewing coworkers, neighbors, anyone who might know him. A pawn shop owner recalled Yoshida selling a laptop days before the murder, his demeanor nervous, his eyes darting. A surveillance camera near Kuroda's home captured a blurry figure that night, a man matching Yoshida's build, his face obscured, but his gait unmistakable. The gun, recovered from a dumpster, bore no prints, but was linked to an underground dealer Yoshida had contacted. The net was tightening, but Yoshida was a ghost, slipping through Tokyo's shadows. Weeks passed, the case dominating headlines. Japan, a nation where gun violence is rare, was stunned by the audacity of the crime. Kuroda's family mourned, their loss compounded by the public unraveling of his flaws. Haruko, stoked in public, broke down in private, her trust in her husband shattered by revelations of infidelity. Their children, teenagers caught in a storm of grief, withdrew, their futures clouded by a father's legacy. The company, already faltering, faced a leadership crisis, its stock plummeting as investors fled. Tokyo watched, its polished exterior cracked by a crime that exposed the fragility of success. The breakthrough came in September 2004, when a tip led police to a cheap motel on the city's outskirts. Yoshida, gaunt and unshaven, was hiding there, his money gone, his spirit broken. He surrendered without a fight, his hands raised, his voice barely a whisper. "I did it," he said, his confession spilling out like a dam breaking. He described the night, the gun, the moment he pulled the trigger. He spoke of Kuroda's betrayal, of years spent in ruin, of a life stolen by a man who never looked back. I wanted him to feel what I felt, Yoshida said, his eyes empty. I wanted him to lose. The trial, held in 2005, was a spectacle. Yoshida stood before the court, his head bowed, his silence a stark contrast to the man who'd once dreamed of greatness. The prosecution painted him as a monster, a man consumed by envy, his act premeditated and unforgivable. They presented the gun, the footage, Yoshida's own words, building a case that left no room for doubt. The defense argued desperation, claiming Yoshida's mental state, depression, obsession clouded his judgment. Yet, he was broken, his lawyer said, a man pushed to the edge by betrayal. But the court was unmoved. Japan's justice system, precise and unforgiving, demanded accountability. Yoshida was sentenced to life imprisonment, a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crime. He showed no emotion, his fate accepted, his story reduced to a cautionary tale. Kuroda's family, seated in the gallery, found no solace in the verdict, only a hollow sense of closure. Haruko spoke briefly to the press, her voice steady but strained. Euchre made mistakes, but he didn't deserve this. None of us did. The company, now under new leadership, limped on, its glory days in memory. Tokyo, ever resilient, moved forward, but the murder left a mark, a reminder of the cost of ambition. The case of Yuka Kuroda sparked a reckoning in Japan. It exposed the pressures of corporate life, where success is a double-edged sword and failure can breed deadly resentment. It highlighted the mental health crisis lurking beneath the surface, as men like Yoshida, broken by societal expectations, found no outlet but rage. The murder led to calls for reform, better workplace protections, more support for those cast aside by the system. Companies began offering counseling, though change was slow. The case also raised questions about gun control, a rare issue in Japan, prompting stricter enforcement against black market weapons. Kohyo's family, the pain is eternal. Haruko rebuilt her life, raising her children alone, their father's memory a mix of love and betrayal. The children, now adults, carry the weight of a name tarnished by scandal, their futures shaped by a night they can't erase. The company's employees, many of whom admired Haruko, grappled with his flaws, their loyalty tested by the truth. Tokyo's elite, shaken by the crime, grew more guarded, their trust in partnerships frayed. Japan, a nation built on harmony, was forced to confront the chaos that ambition can unleash. What drove Dai Yoshida to pull that trigger? Was it the sting of betrayal? The years of watching Kuroda thrive while he suffered? Was it the pressure of a society that equates worth with wealth, leaving no room for failure? Or was it something deeper, a darkness that grew in the silence of his isolation? Yoshida's crime was not just against Kuroda, but against the illusion of order, the belief that hard work guarantees reward. His story is a warning, a mirror held up to a world where envy can turn deadly, where the pursuit of success can lead to ruin. The murder of Yuka Kuroda is more than a crime. It's a tragedy of human frailty. Kuroda, flawed but brilliant, was a man who reached too high, unaware of the shadows he cast. Yoshida, broken but culpable, was a man who let resentment consume him, trading his humanity for revenge. Their story is a clash of dreams and despair, a reminder that the line between ally and enemy is thin, and the consequences of crossing it are eternal. Tokyo's skyline still gleams, its ambition undimmed, but beneath it lies the echo of a gunshot, a sound that lingers in the hearts of those who know its cost. We leave this story. Think of Yuka Kuroda, sitting in his study, unaware of the end approaching. Think of Daya Yoshida, standing in that alley, his hand on the gun, his soul already lost. Think of the family, the city, the nation left to pick up the pieces. The Price of Betrayal in 2004 is a story of loss, but also of lessons, a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the enduring need for compassion in a world that too often rewards none. Somewhere in Tokyo's endless lights, the ghosts of that night linger, whispering of a debt that can never be repaid. Part 8, The Digital Obsession, South Korea, 2004. In the vibrant, tech-savvy heart of Seoul, where the glow of screens lights up the night, January 2004 brought a crime that exposed the hidden dangers of a world newly connected. This is the story of Uni Park, a beloved teacher whose kindness made her a beacon, whose trust in a stranger cost her everything. It's a tale of a virtual bond turned deadly, of an obsession that spiraled into madness, and of a city forced to confront the shadows lurking behind its digital facade. A tale that asks, what happens when the line between online and offline blurs, and the cost of connection is paid in blood? Welcome to the murder of Uni Park, a story that will pull you into the chilling intersection of technology and terror, a reminder that even the warmest hearts can be ensnared by the coldest intentions. Picture Seoul in early 2004, a city racing toward the future. Skyscrapers tower over ancient palaces, their neon signs pulsing with life. The streets buzz with energy, students in cafes, workers rushing to offices, the air thick with the hum of progress. This is the dawn of South Korea's digital revolution, a time when internet cafes or PC bangs are as common as convenience stores, and online chat rooms connect strangers across the globe. In this world, Unipark was a quiet anchor. At 47, she was a middle school teacher, her classroom a haven for students who adored her. With her gentle voice and patient smile, Uni was more than an educator. She was a mentor, a confidant, a woman who believed in the goodness of others. Uni's life was one of purpose, but also solitude. Divorced with no children, she lived alone in a modest apartment in Gangnam, its walls lined with books and photos of her students. Her days were filled with lesson plans and grading papers. Her evenings spent reading or strolling the city's vibrant streets. But like many in Seoul's fast-paced world, Uni felt the ache of loneliness. The internet, still a novelty in 2004, offered a solution. She joined chat rooms not for romance, but for connection, a place to share thoughts with strangers who felt like friends. It was in one of these virtual spaces that she met Sun-ho Kim, a man whose words would draw her in and whose darkness would destroy her. Sun-ho Kim was 32, a software engineer with a life that seemed ordinary on the surface. He worked long hours in Seoul's tech industry, his cubicle a world of code and deadlines. But beneath his unassuming exterior, a slight build, wire-rimmed glasses, a quiet demeanor, lay a mind in turmoil. Sun-ho was isolated, his social life limited to the glow of his computer screen. He'd never married, his relationships fleeting, his confidence eroded by years of rejection. Online, though, he was different. Charming, witty, a man who could craft a persona that masked his insecurities. In a chat room for book lovers, he found Uni, her warmth a light in his lonely world. Their connection began innocently. Uni, drawn to Sun-ho's thoughtful messages about literature, shared stories of her students, her love of poetry. Sun-ho responded with flattery, his words carefully chosen to mirror her interests. "You sound like someone who makes the world better," he wrote, his sincerity disarming. They exchanged messages for months, their bond growing through late-night chats. Uni, cautious but trusting, saw Sun-ho as a friend, a kindred spirit in a city that often felt cold. She shared details of her life, her teaching, her routines, her apartment's view of Seoul's skyline. Sun-ho, however, saw something more, a connection that filled a void, a woman who belonged to him. The shift was gradual, almost imperceptible. Sun-ho's messages grew intense, his tone possessive. "Why didn't you reply last night?" he'd ask, his words sharp. "I need to know you're there." Uni, uncomfortable, tried to set boundaries. "I'm busy with work," she'd write, her responses polite but firm. "Let's keep this friendly." But Sun-ho wouldn't listen. His messages turned desperate, then angry. "You don't understand how much you mean to me," he wrote, his words a plea and a threat. Uni, sensing danger, stopped responding, hoping distance would cool his ardor. She didn't know that silence would be her undoing. Sun-ho's obsession deepened in the void of Uni's absence. He reread their chats, his mind twisting her kindness into something more. He scoured the internet, piecing together her life from fragments she'd shared, her school, her neighborhood, her habits. He found her address, a detail she'd mentioned in passing, and began watching her from a distance. He saw her leave for work, her figure small against Seoul's bustle. He followed her to a cafe, his presence unnoticed, his fixation growing. To Sun-ho, Uni wasn't just a person. She was his salvation, and her rejection was a betrayal he couldn't forget. The plan formed in the quiet of his apartment, a place as sterile as his emotions. Sun-ho bought a knife, its blade sharp and cold, a tool for the justice he believed he deserved. He told himself it wasn't murder, but a confrontation, a chance to make her understand. But his actions betrayed a darker truth. On January 20, 2004, cold Tuesday night, he made his move. Seoul was alive with its usual chaos, its streets bright under a winter sky. Uni, unaware of the danger, was home, her apartment a sanctuary after a long day. She was grading papers, a cup of tea steaming beside her when the knock came. The knock was soft, hesitant, almost polite. Uni, expecting a neighbor, opened the door, her smile fading as she saw Sun Ho. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight with alarm. Sun Ho's face was pale, his eyes burning with a mix of desperation and rage. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, unsteady. Uni stepped back, her instincts screaming danger. "You need to leave," she said, her hand reaching for the door. But Sun Ho was faster. He pushed inside, the knife gleaming in his hand, his words a torrent of pain and fury. "You can't ignore me. You can't." The attack was swift, merciless. Uni fought, her hands clawing at Sun Ho, her voice rising in a scream cut short. The knife struck again and again, each blow a release of Sun Ho's anguish. Uni fell, her body crumpling to the floor, her blood staining the hardwood. Sun Ho stood over her, his breath ragged. The reality of what he'd done crashing over him. Panic replaced rage. He fled, the knife still in his hand, his mind a blur as he vanished into Seoul's neon maze. Behind them, Uni Park lay dead, her life stolen by a man she'd never truly known. The next morning, a colleague, worried when Uni didn't arrive at school, called her phone, then visited her apartment. The door was ajar, an ominous sign in Seoul's orderly world. She stepped inside, her gasp echoing as she saw Uni's body. The police arrived within minutes, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene. The apartment was a snapshot of violence. Bloodstains, overturned furniture, a teacher's life extinguished in her own home. The knife wounds, deep and numerous, spoke of rage, of a personal vendetta. This was no robbery, no random act. It was targeted, intimate, a crime that demanded answers. The Seoul Metropolitan Police moved quickly, their investigation fueled by shock and urgency. Uni's life was dissected, her kindness a stark contrast to her brutal end. Colleagues describe her as dedicated, her students as heartbroken. Her ex-husband, long out of touch, was cleared, his grief genuine but distant. The police turned to her digital life, a new frontier in 2004. Uni's computer revealed the chat room, the messages, the name Sun Ho Kim. Her final exchanges, marked by unease, painted a picture of a relationship gone wrong. The police had their suspect, but finding him would test their resolve. Sun Ho Kim was a fugitive, but not a clever one. He fled Seoul, his movements erratic, his resources limited. He stayed in cheap motels, his face hidden under a cap, his mind unraveling under the weight of guilt. The police traced his digital footprint, logins, bank transactions, a trail that led to Busan, then Daegu. A nationwide manhunt began, Sun Ho's photo plastered on news broadcasts, his name a synonym for danger. Tips poured in, each one a flicker of hope. On January 28th, 8 days after the murder, a motel clerk in Daegu recognized him, her call to the police swift and decisive. The arrest was anticlimactic, a stark contrast to the crime's horror. Sun Ho surrendered without resistance, his hands raised, his eyes hollow. "I didn't mean to kill her," he said, his voice barely audible. In custody, he confessed, his words a jumbled mix of remorse and delusion. He described the chat room, the messages, the obsession that consumed him. "She was supposed to love me," he said, his voice breaking. "When she stopped talking, I couldn't let go." The knife, recovered from a riverbank, bore Une's blood and his fingerprints, sealing his fate. Sun Ho Kim, the quiet engineer, was a murderer, his life now defined by a single, irreversible act. The trial, held in late 2004, was a media storm. South Korea, a nation embracing the internet, was gripped by the case, a cautionary tale of digital dangers. Sun Ho stood before the court, his head bowed, his silence a stark contrast to the man who'd once charmed Uni with words. The prosecution painted him as a predator, his obsession a calculated path to violence. They presented the messages, the knife, Sun Ho's confession, building a case that left no doubt. The defense argued mental instability, claiming Sun Ho's isolation and rejection drove him to a breaking point. "He's not a monster," his lawyer said. "He's a man who lost himself." But the court was unforgiving. Sun Ho Kim was sentenced to life imprisonment, a punishment that reflected the brutality of his crime. He showed no emotion. His fate accepted, his story a warning etched into South Korea's consciousness. Uni's family, her parents, her brother, found no solace in the verdict, only a hollow sense of justice. Her mother, clutching a photo of Uni, spoke to reporters. She trusted too much. She deserved to live. Her students, devastated, created a memorial at school, a garden where her spirit could linger. Seoul, ever forward moving, paused to mourn, its digital glow dimmed by a crime that hit too close to home. The case of Uni Park shook South Korea to its core. It exposed the dangers of online relationships, a new phenomenon in 2004, when chat rooms were uncharted territory. The murder sparked a national conversation about internet safety, leading to campaigns educating users about privacy and boundaries. Schools introduced digital literacy programs, teaching students to recognize red flags. The government pushed for stricter regulations on online platforms, though enforcement lagged. The case also highlighted the mental health crisis, as men like Sun Ho, isolated by modern life, found solace in virtual worlds that could turn dead. For Uni's family, the loss is a wound that never heals. Her parents visit her grave, their flowers a quiet tribute to a daughter who lit up their world. Her brother, now a teacher himself, carries her legacy, his lessons infused with her kindness. Her students, grown but forever changed, remember her as the teacher who believed in them. Their tributes a testament to her impact. Seoul's tech community, shaken by the crime, grew more cautious, its trust in digital connections frayed. South Korea, pioneer of the internet age, was forced to confront the shadows it cast, the risks of a world where strangers are only a click away. What drove Sun Ho Kim to that fateful night? Was it the loneliness of a life spent in isolation, the rejection that fueled his obsession? Was it the illusion of intimacy created by a screen, a fantasy he couldn't let go? Or was it something darker? A flaw in his soul that saw Uni not as a person, but as a possession. Sun Ho's crime was not just against Uni, but against the promise of connection, the belief that technology could bridge the gaps in our hearts. His stories of warning, a mirror held up to a world where virtual bonds can lead to real-world horror. Murder of Uni Park is more than a tragedy. It's a lesson in the fragility of trust. Uni, with her open heart, was a woman who saw the best in others, unaware of the danger that saw her first. Sun Ho, with his broken mind, was a man who let obsession consume him, trading his humanity for a moment of control. Their story is a clash of light and darkness, a reminder that the digital age, for all its wonders, carries risks we're only beginning to understand. Seoul's skyline still shines, its screens brighter than ever, but beneath it lies the echo of a knock, a sound that lingers in the hearts of those who know its cost. As we leave this story, think of Uni Park, grading papers in her quiet apartment, unaware of the end approaching. Think of Sun Ho Kim, standing at her door, his hand on the knife, his soul already lost. Think of the family, the city, the nation left to grapple with the fallout. The digital obsession of 2004 is a story of loss, but also of awakening, a testament to the need for vigilance in a world where connection comes at a price. Somewhere in Seoul's endless lights, Uni's spirit lingers, a whisper of caution in a city that never sleeps. Part 9, The Lover's Betrayal. Thailand, 2004. In the sultry, vibrant streets of Bangkok, where tradition and modernity dance under a tropical sky, January 2004 brought a crime that tore through the heart of a community already on the margins. This is the story of Chatrabi Danaranasamy, a transgender woman whose beauty and courage made her a star, whose trust in love led to her doom. It's a tale of passion turned to poison, of a lover's betrayal that ended in blood, and of a society forced to confront its own shadows. Ugh. A tale that asks, what happens when love becomes a cage and the cost of identity is paid with a life? Welcome to the murder of Chatrabi Danaranasamy, a story that will draw you into the glittering, dangerous world of Bangkok's underbelly, a reminder that even the brightest souls can be dimmed by the darkest hearts. Picture Bangkok in early 2004, a city of contrast where ancient temples stand beside neon-lit bars and the Chao Phraya River carries secrets through the night. The streets pulse with life, vendors hawking spicy samtam, tuk-tuks weaving through traffic, and cabarets dazzling with sequins and smiles. In this world, Chatrabi Danaranasamy was a beacon. At 28, she was a performer at a renowned transgender cabaret, her grace and charisma lighting up the stage. Known as Chloe to her fans, Chatrabi was a vision, tall, elegant, with eyes that held both strength and vulnerability. To her audience, she was a star. To her friends, a sister. To herself, A woman who'd fought to live her truth in a society that often turned away. Gotta meet a treasure. Chatrabe's life was a testament to resilience. Born in a small village in northern Thailand, she faced rejection early. Her family struggled with her gender identity, their love tempered by tradition. At 16, she left for Bangkok, chasing a dream of acceptance. The city, with its vibrant transgender community, became her home. She worked as a dancer, then a cabaret star, her performances earning applause and adoration. Offstage, she was generous, her apartment a gathering place for friends who shared her journey, yet beneath her confidence lay a longing for love, for stability, for a world that saw her as she was. That longing led her to Somchai Banyasiri, a man whose charm masked a darkness she couldn't see. Somchai Bunyasuri was 35, a mid-level manager at a logistics company, his life one of quiet ambition. Stocky with a disarming smile and a knack for conversation, Somchai blended into Bangkok's bustling middle class. But his private world was chaotic. Failed relationships, mounting debts, and a temper that flared behind closed doors. He met Chachabi at her cabaret, drawn to her radiance, her laughter a contrast to his own discontent. To Somchai, Chatrabai was exotic, a prize to be won, but also a challenge to his fragile sense of control. Their romance began as a whirlwind, but it would end as a storm. Their relationship started in the summer of 2003, sparked by a chance encounter after one of Chatrabi's shows. Somchai, seated in the front row, sent her a drink, his note bold but charming, "You're unforgettable." Chatrabi, flattered, agreed to meet him, her caution softened by his persistence. He wooed her with dinners, flowers, promises of a future together. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he'd say, his words wrapping her in warmth. Chatrabi, who'd faced rejection from lovers afraid to embrace her identity, saw Somchai as different. A man who accepted her, or so she believed. She let him into her life, sharing her dreams, her fears, her heart. But the cracks appeared quickly. Somchai's affection was possessive, his questions sharp. "Who are you talking to at the show?" he'd demand, his eyes narrowing. "Why do you need to perform? You have me now." Chatrabi, independent and proud, pushed back, her voice firm. "This is my life, Somchai. I won't change for you." Her defiance, meant to set boundaries, only fueled his insecurity. Somchai's love, once passionate, turned controlling, his jealousy a fire that burned hotter with each perceived slight. Friends noticed Chatrabi's light dimming, her laughter less frequent, her eyes shadowed with worry. By late 2003, the relationship was unraveling. Chatrabi tried to end it, her words gentle but resolute. "We're not good for each other," she told him, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. Somchai begged, then raged, his pleas giving way to threats. "You can't leave me," he said, his voice a low growl. "You'll regret it." Chatrabi confided in friends, her fear palpable. "He won't let go," she said, her hands trembling. "I don't know what he'll do." She changed her locks, avoided his calls, but Somchai's presence lingered. A shadow she couldn't escape. The obsession consumed him. Somchai stalked her, his nights spent outside her apartment watching her windows, his mind twisting her rejection into betrayal. He kept mementos, photos, ticket stubs from her shows, a scarf she'd left behind. His apartment a shrine to a love that never truly existed. He bought a knife, its blade a cold promise of retribution, telling himself it was to scare her, to make her see his pain. But his actions betrayed a deeper intent. On January 15, 2004, a humid Thursday night, he made his move, his heart a battlefield of love and hate. Bangkok was alive with its usual chaos, its bars and markets thrumming under a starry sky. Chatrabi, fresh from her performance, returned to her apartment in Sukhumvit, her sequined dress swapped for jeans and a sweater, her face bare of stage makeup. She was tired, heart heavy with the weight of Somchai's threats, but determined to reclaim her life. She locked the door, poured a glass of water, and sat on her couch, unaware that danger was already inside. Somchai, using a key he'd copied months earlier, had slipped in before she arrived, his presence a silent menace in the darkened bedroom. Now, the confrontation came without warning. Somchai stepped into the living room, the knife in his hand, his face a mask of anguish and rage. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling, using her stage name as if to claim her. Chaturbai froze, her breath catching. Samchai, get out, she said, her voice sharp, her body tensing. This is over. But Samchai wasn't listening. You think you can walk away? He shouted, his words a torrent of pain. You're mine. Kachababi stood, backing toward the door, her hands raised to calm him. Please, don't do this, she said, her voice breaking. But Samchai was beyond reason. His love a prison he'd never escape. The attack was swift, brutal. Chaturbi fought, her nails clawing at Samchai, her screams echoing through the apartment. The knife struck her chest, her arms, her throat, each blow a release of Samchai's torment. She fell, her blood pooling on the floor, her eyes wide with the betrayal of a man she'd once trusted. Samchai stood over her, his breath ragged, the knife slipping from his hand. For a moment he was still, the reality of his act crashing over him. Then panic took hold. He fled, leaving the knife behind, his mind a blur as he vanished into Bangkok's neon-lit streets. And the next morning, a friend, worried when Chaturvahi didn't answer her phone, visited the apartment. The door was unlocked, an ominous sign. She stepped inside, her scream shattering the silence as she saw Chaturvahi's body. Police swarmed the scene, their faces grim as they surveyed the carnage. The living room was a battlefield. Bloodstains, overturned furniture, a performer's life extinguished in her own home. The knife wounds, numerous and deep, spoke of rage, of a personal vendetta. This was no random crime. It was intimate, a lover's wrath turned deadly. The Royal Thai police launched an urgent investigation, their resolve fueled by the brutality of the crime and Chairabi's status as a beloved figure. Her life was dissected, her courage a stark contrast to her tragic end. Friends spoke of her strength, her struggles as a transgender woman in a conservative society. Her cabaret colleagues, devastated, described her as a sister, their performances dimmed by her absence. The police turned to her romantic history, quickly zeroing in on Somchai Bunyasiri. His calls, his threats, his presence in her life were no secret. Witnesses recalled seeing him near her apartment, his demeanor erratic, his eyes haunted. Somchai was a fugitive, but his trail was fresh. He fled Bangkok, his movements desperate, his resources dwindling. He stayed in cheap guest houses, his face hidden, his mind unraveling under the weight of guilt. The police traced his bank cards, his phone, his past, building a map of his escape. A nationwide alert went out, Somchai's photo on every news channel, his name a warning to a city in shock. Tips flooded in, each one a spark of hope. On January 22, 7 days after the murder, a vendor in Pattaya recognized him, her call to the police swift and certain. The arrest was quiet, a stark contrast to the crime's violence. Somchai surrendered in a dimly lit alley, his hands raised, his voice broken. I loved her, he said, his words a hollow defense. In custody, he confessed, his story a tangle of obsession and remorse. He described the months of watching Chaturubab, the night he bought, the night he couldn't stop himself. I wanted her to stay, he said, his eyes empty. Didn't know it would end like this. The knife, recovered from the scene, bore Chaturubab's blood and his fingerprints, sealing his fate. Somchai Bunyasiri, the man who'd promised love, was a murderer, his life defined by a single, irreversible act. The trial, held in mid-2004, was a media frenzy. Thailand, a nation with a vibrant transgender community but deep-seated prejudices, was gripped by the case, a spotlight on the dangers faced by those on the margins. Somchai stood before the court, his head bowed, his silence a stark contrast to the man who'd once charmed Chatrabi. The prosecution painted him as a predator, his obsession a calculated path to violence. They presented the knife, the threats, Somchai's confession, building a case that left no doubt. The defense argued passion, claiming Somchai's love drove him to a moment of madness. He's not evil, his lawyer said. He's a man who broke under the weight of rejection. But the court was resolute. Somchai Bunyasiri was sentenced to life imprisonment, a punishment that reflected the savagery of his crime. He showed no emotion, his fate accepted, his story, a cautionary tale etched into Bangkok's memory. Chatrabi's family, her mother, her siblings, found no joy in the verdict, only a fragile sense of justice. Her mother, clutching a photo of Chatrabi in her stage costume, spoke to reporters. She was our pride. She deserved to shine. Her cabaret troupe created a memorial performance, a tribute to a star whose light would never fade. Bangkok, ever resilient, mourned, its glitter dimmed by a crime that struck at its heart. Chitrabadi Donaren Asami shook Thailand to its core. It exposed the vulnerabilities of transgender women who face violence at disproportionate rates, their lives often dismissed by a society slow to change. The murder sparked protests, with activists demanding better protections, hate crime laws, and recognition of gender identity. Thailand's government, under pressure, promised reforms. Though progress was halting, the case also highlighted the dangers of domestic violence, as Somchai's controlling behavior went unchecked until it was too late. Support groups for survivors grew, their voices amplified by Chakrawi's story. For Chatpraher's family, the loss is eternal. Her mother visits her grave. Her flowers, a quiet tribute to a daughter who defied the odds. Her siblings, now advocates for transgender rights, carry her legacy, their work a testament to her courage. Her friends, the cabaret performers who called her sister, honor her with every show. Their sequins a nod to her spirit. Bangkok's transgender community, shaken but unbowed, grew stronger, their visibility a defiance of prejudice. Thailand, a nation of beauty and contradiction, was forced to confront its biases, the cost of ignoring those it pushes to the edges. Like me Poen, what drove Somchai Buyasari to that fateful night? Was it the insecurity of a man who couldn't accept Chatrabi's independence? The fear of losing a love he never truly had? Was it the pressure of a society that equates control with masculinity, leaving no room for vulnerability? Or was it something darker? A flaw in his soul that saw Chatrabi not as a person, but as a possession. Somchai's crime was not just against Chatrabi, but against the promise of acceptance, the belief that love can transcend boundaries. His story is a warning, a mirror held up to a world where passion can turn deadly, where identity is both a gift and a risk. The murder of Chachabi Danaran Asami is more than a tragedy. It's a call to action. Chachabi, with her radiant heart, was a woman who lived authentically, unaware of the danger that envied her light. Somchai, with his broken mind, was a man who let obsession consume him, trading his humanity for a moment of power. Their story is a clash of love and hate, a reminder that the fight for equality is far from over, that every life deserves to be seen. Bangkok's lights still burn, its cabarets brighter than ever, but beneath them lies the echo of a scream, a sound that lingers in the hearts of those who know its cost. As we leave this story, think of Chatrabi Daneren Asami, dancing on that stage, unaware of the end approaching. Think of Somchai Bunyasiri, standing in her apartment, his hand on the knife, his soul already lost. Think of the family, the community, the nation left to heal from the wounds. The lover's betrayal of 2004 is a story of loss, but also of strength. A testament to the resilience of those who shine despite the darkness. Somewhere in Bangkok's endless nights, Chatrabi's spirit lingers, a whisper of defiance in a city that will never forget her. Part 10. The Family Betrayal, Malaysia, 2004. In the lush, bustling heart of Kuala Lumpur, where towering skyscrapers cast shadows over ancient traditions, January 2004 brought a crime that shattered a family and stunned a nation. This is the story of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid, a man whose wealth and generosity made him a pillar of his community, whose life was stolen by the one he trusted most. It's a tale of greed that poisoned blood ties, of a betrayal that ended in blood, and of a society forced to confront the fragility of loyalty in the face of ambition. A tale that asks, what happens when envy festers in the heart of a family and the cost of wealth is paid with a life? Welcome to the murder of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid, a story that will pull you into the dark undercurrents of Malaysia's elite, a reminder that even the closest bonds can break under the weight of desire. Picture Kuala Lumpur in early 2004, a city on the cusp of greatness. The Petronas Towers gleam against a tropical sky, their steel and glass a symbol of Malaysia's rise. The streets hum with life, markets fragrant with satay, mosques calling the faithful to prayer, and corporate offices buzzing with deals. In this world of progress and tradition, Mustasa bin Abdul Majid was a titan. At 52, he was a property developer, his company shaping the city's skyline with luxury condos and sprawling malls. Tall, with a commanding presence and a warm laugh, Mustasa was a man who bridged worlds, devoutly Muslim, fiercely ambitious, and deeply tied to his family. His mansion in Bukit Damansara, a gated enclave of the wealthy, was a testament to his success. Its marble floors and manicured gardens, a far cry from the kampung where he'd been born. Mustasa's life was one of triumph over hardship. Raised in a modest village in Kelantan, he had worked his way up through sheer grit, starting as a contractor before building an empire. His wealth was vast, but so was his generosity. He funded mosques, sponsored orphans, and employed relatives in his company, believing family was the bedrock of his legacy. His wife, Fatima, was his partner in faith and life. Their 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. His pride. To the outside world, Mustasa had it all: power, love, respect. But within his inner circle, a shadow was growing, a resentment that would turn his generosity into a death sentence. That shadow belonged to Rahim bin Ismail, Mustasa's nephew. At 30, Rahim was a man caught between ambition and inadequacy. The son of Mustasa's older sister, Rahim, had grown up in the glow of his uncle's success, his own life a pale imitation. Mustasa had taken him under his wing, giving him a job as a project manager in the company, a generous salary, even a car. But Rahim chafed under the charity, his pride wounded by the constant reminder of his uncle's superiority. Colleagues described him as charming but volatile, his smile masking a temper that flared when he felt slighted. To Rahim, Mustasa's wealth was a taunt, a fortune he believed he deserved more than his uncle's children, who seemed to inherit effortlessly what he could only beg for. As the seeds of betrayal were sown years earlier, in small slights that Rahim nursed into grudges. Mustasa, unaware of the growing resentment, treated Rahim like a son, but his decisions, promoting others over Rahim, prioritizing his own children's education, felt like rejections to his nephew. Rahim's life was unraveling in other ways. Debts from gambling, a strained marriage, whispers of an affair. He hid his struggles, his charm a mask for the chaos within, but in private he seethed, his thoughts turning to Mustasa's wealth, his mansion, his legacy. If he couldn't have it in life, he'd take it in death. The plan took shape in the quiet of Rahim's mind, a scheme as cold as it was desperate. He knew Mustasa's routines, his trust in family, his habit of working late in his home office. Rahim recruited an accomplice, a low-level employee named Zainal, a man with his own debts and no loyalty to Mustasa. They planned to stage a robbery, a cover for the real motive: murder. Rahim stole a gun from a black market dealer, its weight a promise of power. He told himself it was justice, a rebalancing of a family's scales. But as the day approached, doubt crept in. A flicker of the boy who'd once idolized his uncle. Could he do this? Could he betray blood? The answer came on January 18, 2004, a night that would shatter a family forever. It was a Sunday, the city simmering under a humid dusk. Mustasa spent the day with his family, attending a charity event, his laughter echoing through the crowd. By evening, he returned to his mansion, his wife and children staying at a relative's home for a gathering. The house was quiet, its staff dismissed for the night, leaving Mustasa alone in his office reviewing contracts. Outside, Rahim and Zainal waited in a parked car, their faces taut, their plan in motion. Rahim's hands gripped the gun, his knuckles pale. No turning back, he muttered, more to himself than to Zainal. They slipped through the gate, its code unchanged since Rahim's last visit, and moved toward the house. The back door, as expected, was unlocked, a small oversight in Mustasa's otherwise secure world. Rahim led the way, his steps silent, the mansion swallowing them like a secret. They found Mustasa in his office, his back to the door, engrossed in papers. Rahim's voice, low and trembling, broke the silence. "Uncle?" Mustasa turned, his eyes widening, a mix of surprise and warmth. "Rahim, what's this about?" The warmth faded as he saw the gun, Zainal's looming presence, the betrayal written on his nephew's face. "What are you doing?" Mustasa asked, his voice steady but laced with fear. Rahim's resolve hardened, his words a torrent of pain. "You gave me scraps, while your kids got everything," he said, his voice rising. "I'm taking what's mine." Mustasa stood, his hands raised, his voice calm despite the gun. "Rahim, we're family. Whatever you need, I'll give you. Put the gun down." But Rahim was beyond reason, his envy a fire that consumed all else. He fired once, the bullet striking Mustasa's chest, then again, the second shot piercing his heart. Mustasa collapsed, his blood pooling on the marble floor, his eyes fixed on Rahim, not with anger but with sorrow. Zainal, panicked, grabbed a few valuables, a watch, a laptop, to stage the robbery. But Rahim stood frozen. the gun still in his hand, the weight of his act crashing over him. They fled. The night swallowing their escape, Rahim tossed the gun into a storm drain, his mind racing, his heart a void. Zainal, less loyal than greedy, took his share and disappeared, leaving Rahim to face the consequences alone. The next morning, a gardener found Mustasa's body, his scream alerting the neighborhood. Police swarmed the mansion, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene. The office was a snapshot of violence. Bloodstains, bullet casings, a businessman's life extinguished in his own home. The lack of forced entry suggested the killer knew Mustasa had been let in or had access. This was no random robbery. It was personal, a betrayal that demanded answers. The Royal Malaysia Police launched a relentless investigation, the resolve fueled by Mustasa's prominence and the brutality of the crime. His life was dissected, his generosity a stark contrast to his violent end. His wife, Fatima, was devastated, her grief raw as she faced a future without her partner. Their children, stunned by the loss, struggled to reconcile their father's love with the betrayal that took him. A colleague spoke of Mustasa's vision, his enemies few, but his success a magnet for envy. The police turned to his family, and one name stood out: Rahim bin Ismail, the nephew whose ambition outstripped his loyalty. Rahim was their prime suspect, but he was slippery. He'd returned to work, his charm masking his guilt, his alibi a patchwork of lies. The police questioned him, their eyes sharp, his answers rehearsed but shaky. "I was with friends that night," he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. The police didn't buy it. They traced his movements, finding inconsistencies. A car seen near the mansion, a phone call to Zainal hours before the murder. The staged robbery unraveled when the stolen items were found in a pawn shop, Zainal's name on the receipt. Under pressure, Zainal confessed, his loyalty to Rahim crumbling. "It was Rahim's idea," he said, his voice desperate. "He wanted Mustasa dead." The net closed quickly. On January 25, a week after the murder, police arrested Rahim at his apartment, his face pale, his defiance gone. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his confession spilling out like a dam breaking. He described the plan, the gun, the moment he pulled the trigger. He spoke of Mustasa's generosity, his own envy, the years of feeling second best. "I wanted what he had," Rahim said, his eyes empty. "I thought it would fix everything." The gun, recovered from the drain, bore Mustasa's blood and Rahim's fingerprints, sealing his fate. Rahim bin Ismail, the nephew Mustasa treated as a son, was a murderer, his life defined by a single unforgivable act. The trial, held in late 2004, was a media storm. Malaysia, a nation balancing tradition and modernity, was gripped by the case, a tale of family turned against itself. Rahim stood before the court, his head bowed, his silence a stark contrast to the man who'd once dreamed of greatness. The prosecution painted him as a monster, his greed a calculated path to violence. They presented the gun, the confession, Zainal's testimony, building a case that left no doubt. The defense argued desperation, claiming Rahim's debts and insecurities drove him to a breaking point. "He's not evil," his lawyer said. "He's a man who lost his way." But the court was resolute. Rahim bin Ismail was sentenced to death, a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crime in Malaysia's strict justice system. He showed no emotion, his fate accepted, his story a warning etched into the nation's memory. Zainal, as an accomplice, received life imprisonment, his role secondary but unforgivable. Mustasa's family found no solace in the verdict, only a hollow sense of justice. Fatima spoke to reporters, her voice steady but strained. "Mustasa loved Rahim like a son. This betrayal is worse than death." Their children, now tasked with carrying their father's legacy, vowed to honor his generosity, their grief a fire that forged resilience. Kuala Lumpur, ever forward-moving, mourned, its skyline dimmed by a crime that struck at its heart. The case of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid shook Malaysia to its core. It exposed the dangers of wealth, a magnet for envy that can turn even family into enemies. The murder sparked debates about greed in a rapidly modernizing society where success is both celebrated and resented. It highlighted the pressures on extended families where obligations can breed resentment rather than unity. Malaysia's government, under pressure, pushed for financial literacy programs to curb gambling debts. Like Rahim's, though change was slow, the case also raised questions about security for the elite, prompting gated communities to tighten protocols. For Mustasa's family, the loss is eternal. Fatima rebuilt her life, her faith guiding her through grief, her husband's memory, a light that never fades. Their children, now leaders in their own right, carry his name, their work a tribute to his vision. The company, under new management, thrived, its projects a testament to Mustasa's dream of a modern Malaysia. Kuala Lumpur's business community, shaken by the crime, grew more guarded, their trust and family partnerships frayed. Malaysia, a nation of harmony and ambition, was forced to confront the shadows cast by its progress, the cost of a dream that leaves some behind. What drove Rahim bin Ismail to that fateful night? Was it the envy of a man who couldn't escape his uncle's shadow? The desperation of a life drowning in debt? Was it the pressure of a society that equates worth with wealth, leaving no room for failure? Or was it something darker? A flaw in his soul that saw Mustasa not as family but as an obstacle? Rahim's crime was not just against Mustasa, but against the sanctity of blood, the belief that family is a refuge from the world's cruelties. His story is a warning, a mirror held up to a world where greed can poison even the deepest bonds. The murder of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid is more than a tragedy. It's a lesson in the fragility of trust. Mustasa, with his generous heart, was a man who lifted others, unaware of the resentment that would bury him. Rahim, with his broken spirit, was a man who let envy consume him, trading his humanity for a fleeting grasp at power. Their story is a clash of loyalty and betrayal, a reminder that wealth, for all its promise, can be a curse when it breeds division. Kuala Lumpur's skyline still rises, its ambition undimmed, but beneath it lies the echo of a gunshot, a sound that lingers in the hearts of those who know its cost. As we leave this story, think of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid working late in his office, unaware of the end approaching. Think of Rahim bin Ismail standing in that doorway, his hand on the gun, his soul already lost. Think of the family, the city, the nation left to heal from the wounds. The family betrayal of 2004 is a story of loss, but also of resilience, a testament to the enduring strength of those who carry on despite the darkness. Somewhere in Kuala Lumpur's endless lights, Mustasa's spirit lingers, a whisper of generosity in a world that will never forget him. As the rain falls softly outside, its rhythm a quiet companion to these tales, we come to the end of our journey through the darkness of 2004. 10 stories, 10 lives shattered, 10 scars etched into the fabric of cities and souls. From the blood-soaked streets of Jakarta to the neon-lit alleys of Tokyo, from the wind-swept plains of North Dakota to the humid nights of Bangkok, we've walked through the shadows of human nature, where ambition, envy, and desperation collide. These are not just crimes, but mirrors, reflecting the fragility of trust, the weight of betrayal, and the cost of choices that can never be undone. As we leave these stories behind, let their echoes linger, a whisper of the truths they reveal about the world and about ourselves. Think of John Kay and Basri Singaji, their war ablaze that consumed Jakarta's underbelly, leaving questions of power unanswered. Think of Bodhiharto Ananto, his corporate empire crumbling under secrets that may never be fully known. Think of Yang Xinhai, the monster killer whose random cruelty shattered China's real heart, a reminder that evil can wear the face of no one. Think of Billy Joe Lara, whose rage sparked a battle for sovereignty, a fight that echoes beyond the courtroom. Think of Mizuto Harada, her light stolen by a stranger's impulse, her justice delayed but not denied. Think of Yukio Kuroda, betrayed by a partner's envy, his success a spark for his downfall. Think of Uni Park, whose trust in a digital stranger ended in tragedy, a warning from the dawn of the internet age. Think of Chatrabri Donarasamy, her courage as a transgender woman met with a lover's wrath, her story a call for change. Think of Mustasa bin Abdul Majid, his generosity repaid with a nephew's bullet, a family torn by greed. And think of those unnamed whose stories we've touched, their lives altered by the ripples of these crimes that binds these tales. Not just the year, not just the violence, but the human heart, its capacity for love and hate, for creation and destruction. Each crime left a wound not only on the victims, but on the families, the communities, the nations left to heal. Some found justice, others only questions, but all carry a lesson. That safety is fragile, that trust is a gamble, that the line between order and chaos is thinner than we dare admit. These stories ask us to look at the shadows, to see the cost of our choices, to honor those who paid the price. As you drift towards sleep, let the rain carry these tales away, but not their weight. They are part of the world's endless story, a tapestry of light and dark. Somewhere in the cities we've visited, the ghosts of 2004 linger. Their voices soft but unyielding, reminding us that truth, like justice, is a flame that burns eternal, even in the deepest night. Good night, and may your dreams be kinder than the stories we've told.